Good evening, everyone. We will call the August 5, 2013 City Council meeting to order. First order of business is the roll call. Charlene?
Estes. Peterson. Lewis. Doyle. Wright. Scott. Nordstrom. Roberts. Clayton. Lorente. We have quorum.
Thank you. We will now recognize Pastor Dave Kinnan from Fountain Springs Community Church for invocation. You're welcome to participate, but not required.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we just want to thank you and stop. And we are privileged to live where we get to live. You have created incredible things that we get to see and watch. And Lord, we just ask for this meeting, though, that it just fall in your hands. I pray for wisdom for those who need wisdom and discernment for those who need discernment. Lord, I pray that you'll help us to dream big dreams and to accomplish what you want us to accomplish. I pray for those in our city who are less fortunate. God, help us to provide for them in ways they need provided for. And Lord, I just pray that you'll help us all to own the responsibilities that we need to. But Lord, I pray for this meeting and ask that you bless it in your own way. May it glorify you and honor you. We pray this in your name. Amen.
Thank you, everyone. And we will now proceed with the adoption of the agenda. Are there any additions or changes to tonight's agenda? Item 15, by the way, will be pulled so that a funding source can be identified. Are there any other items to be added to the agenda? Seeing none, do we have a motion to approve the agenda? We have a motion by Lorente and second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And we now have our Citizen of the Month. Are the Glovers in attendance tonight? No? Okay, we will move this then to the next meeting. We will now proceed directly into general public comment. This is a time for members of the public to discuss or express concerns with the council on any issue not on the agenda. Action will not be taken at the meeting on any issue not on the agenda except by placement with the unanimous vote of the council members present. We will proceed with the general public comment items at this time, and we'll first go to Robert Strike, who would like to speak on the Humane Society. And by the way, this topic will be coming up, Robert, on Monday the 12th of August at the budget hearings. Is Robert here?
I'm here. Good evening, Mr. Mayor and
Good
Council. My name is Robert Strike. I live at 705 San Marco Boulevard here in Rapid. It came to my concern about the Humane Society about 2 years ago. We adopted a puppy who's approximately 3 months old. And that dog did not get along with our other cocker spaniel. It was a black cocker, which is very unusual. So we returned the Cocker Spaniel to the Humane Society, and the thing screamed all the way back to the back room. This was on a Friday. Saturday morning, and when I turned it back in, I also had to pay to surrender the dog. Not only to adopt it, but also to surrender. So then, this was on a Friday. On Saturday morning, I went back, asked them how the dog was doing, and they put it down. Wasn't even a year old. And I asked him why. He said, well, the dog seemed to be aggressive. No puppy's aggressive. Not especially Cocker Spaniel. And I know this is coming up on next meeting. I was told that public comment could not be made on their budget. And what I suggest is that the city council and the county take a more active role in seeing how their money is being spent. There really is no oversight. You give them the money, they have a board, they spend it. The people that are there really don't care. You can tell by their attitudes. I've always had dogs. I've had everything from Samoyeds to Cocker Spaniels, and I've raised dogs and raised litters, paid for many vacations. And I'd like to see the city council take a more active role with their funding, instead of just giving it to them, say, here, just spend it. And that's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Robert. We will now go to Brandon Packard, also under general public comment. Brandon. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the panel. I'm the owner and occupier of 3113 New England Street here in Rapid City, and I'm very happy to be here. This is one of my best assignments yet. I recently returned from my 7th combat deployment to the Middle East 10 days ago, and upon returning home, the first thing I received in the mail was an invoice for services rendered at my property for weeds on the property itself. Apparently, the first notice that was sent out went to the wrong address, and the second notice that was sent out was returned to the place that distributes these. All I received was an invoice here for $172, $42 administrative fee, and $130 for the services rendered for the weed eating of the property. Since then, I've been in contact with everyone except for you, sir, all the way up the chain, and even have a letter here from Mr. Barbier, pretty much forgiving the $42 administrative fee, but said I'd need to present my information to you all as far as the $130 that was charged or is being charged to me. In addition to that, I have a copy of my orders here, stamped from when I left and when I returned home. New property, so it didn't even have a yard. It was all dirt when I left. Right before I went out on my deployment, it was basically the 43 inches of snow we saw earlier in the year. Didn't have a chance to put a yard in, and never received notification there was any issues to take care of it myself. Being in the Air Force now for 16 and a half years, I'm a very responsible individual, and I would have taken care of it on my own accord if I would have been notified in a timely manner. However, I think that also $130 for weed eating a yard one time is pretty egregious, and maybe we need to also figure out the cricket landscaping, if it's actual realistic fees being charged for the services rendered.
Okay. Thank you. My suggestion on this issue, rather than get into motions at general public comment time, is that we add this to next week's Public Works agenda, and with a recommendation from otherwise we can also add it, make it item 74A on tonight's agenda, which requires a unanimous vote of the council to add it to tonight's agenda. We can do either one, but I would please like to avoid discussion and debate at this point in the meeting. Pauline.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If it is taken to a committee meeting, I would request that go to Legal and Finance, as all abatements and special assessment type things go to that one versus Public Works.
Okay. Do we have a motion to take to committee or to make it 74A on tonight's agenda?
I have a question.
We'll go to Bill Clayton. You want to offer a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to offer a motion, since the gentleman is here, and he's got a job in the Air Force at the base, and to ask him to come back again for another meeting to discuss something that we can readily take care of tonight. I would like to make the motion. Oh, there we go. I would like to make the motion that we add this to the agenda.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second to add this to tonight's agenda. 74A. Any objections? Needs to be a unanimous vote. And if not, we can just suspend the rules and add it anyway. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is your question?
Thank you.
Are we going to make him wait till 72? Okay.
He's okay with it by you? Okay. Very good. All right. We will now continue on with our, what's that? 74A. We'll now move on with our general public comments. We'll also go to Vern Johnson. Mr. Johnson. Good evening.
Ladies and gentlemen, good to see you all. At least I can see who's running the city. Good to see you all out. My big question is that I've been here since 1966 when I was assigned to Ellsworth Air Force Base from headquarters. And I've raised, well, actually 2 boys and adopted 1. And I really haven't been second guessing any of the things since then. But I am in an area right now, which is Robbinsdale, which is being infected by noxious weeds. If you want a designation, anybody know what a noxious weed is?
Sure.
Okay, you got a lot of them over there in about a 10-block area. The city came over and did some work on the streets and moved the sidewalk from alongside of the roadway to 4 foot towards the house owner's house. So that it left a gap, supposedly a grassy area between the sidewalk and the roadway. Well, right now, they're being in very high extent of the Canadian thistle. Now, I have contacted, I can get my paper out. I've contacted nearly all of the people. I've contacted the mayor's office. I have contacted Carl Burback and Bill Keck and building codes, and also the county extension agent. Now, I've talked to the people, but there seems to be pieces missing. Each one of the departments said, well, I can only go so far. I have talked to the codes and so on, and they say, we have set up a letter. If anybody's yard gets above, I guess, 6 inches, then they are sent a letter and asked to please cut it. All right? That's fine. But the problem is nobody wants to do anything about killing the noxious weeds. And the more they're cut, there's more coming in. Now, I have talked to contractors and so on, and they said it could have been because we're getting the weeds and so on, is that they brought filled dirt in from someplace else that contained this weed area. Now, I'd just like to see it eliminated from our area because it looks bad over there. And there's not a block that in between 5th Street to St. Anne that doesn't have these in their yard.
I'd like to go briefly to our Community Resources Director, Jeff Barbier. Jeff, would you be willing to bring a report on this to the next Public Works meeting?
Sure, we'd certainly be willing to go out and take a look at it, but I'm not familiar with the situation at this point, so I don't really feel comfortable to speak on it until we do a little research.
Okay, very good. If you could reach out to Vern. Vern, if you could stop by and see Jeff on your way out, give him your phone number so you
I
can
would
get
be
hold-
happy to.
All right. Thank you very
Thank
much
you.
for coming tonight. Let me see here. I do not have any more general public comment forms. Have I missed anyone? The rest of the forms I have are all specific to an item. Kathy, why don't you come on up? And if you could just identify yourself for the record, and the floor is yours.
My name is Kathy Robeson, and I did put in a form, but I put in for 2 different items, so you probably have mine on the other list.
Okay.
I would like to suggest to the council that they adopt some sort of policy so that when groups such as Destination Rapid City, who is doing the promenade and to no cost to the city, and also plans or has plans to possibly put in some playground areas that will, I understand, come before you down the road, that will be of no cost to the city, that it get adopted that when these organizations do this, because of the expense that will come down the road for Parks and Rec to maintain these different areas, that you include a codicil to that arrangement, that they have a percentage of the total project set aside towards maintenance down the road. Because I know I haven't set in on your budget planning, but I know things are tight. And I don't see you having another $250,000 for Parks and Recs to help maintain and to hire the extra people that they need. Not that, $250,000 is off the top of my head. Anyway, I would like to see the city do something like that so that we aren't putting ourselves further and further in debt for something that is a wonderful addition to the city, but that will be able to help pay for the maintenance of that.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak under general public comment? Very good. We will go ahead and move on to items 2 through 50. Public comment is now open on items 2 through 50. And we'll first go to Jordan Mason on item 43.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council, for letting me speak. And for the record, Jordan Mason, 4103 West Main, moved back to town. I heard about the Compass Committee being discussed, so I wanted to come down and just provide a little bit of historical background and just also be available for any questions that may come up just going back. But starting in 2010, began discussions on an audit system. And the purpose was really, and as we've heard earlier tonight from other comments from other citizens, is to really look into the efficiencies and deficiencies as well as the cost effectiveness, both operationally and financially, of the various departments and functions of the city. After doing further research, I reviewed other city plans and looked at how they did it, started to get a rough idea of different ways that it's being done. Around the same time, Alderwoman Charity Doyle came into the political spectrum, contacted her, and started working with her instrumentally on the subject of doing some of the research. Also had the opportunity to speak with Casey Peterson and Associates during some of the research phase. Jumping forward, kind of fast forwarding, just to give a quick rundown here, but in 2011, again, Alderwoman Charity Doyle started working and just hand over or heads over, I can't even speak. Sorry. But worked diligently to move this forward. Long story short, she created the Compass Committee, and then I also had the opportunity to work with her in selecting some of the members on the committee at that time. I think it was pretty clear that the Compass Committee is to save the taxpayers' money by providing an objective analysis of city functions. From what I understand, what's being discussed at this point is to review some of the things that were preliminarily during the start of this, is looking at whether it should be better based as internally or externally. And I think there's fair argument both ways on either way you look at it. In my analysis at the time of doing research, there was various ways you could set it up. Internally was one of the most prominent that I saw, specifically with Sioux Falls. They have an internal audit committee. It's been fairly successful over the past couple of years. But equally so, there are other cities that have oversight committees and do outsource to other companies such as KPG and other large auditing companies. But I just wanted to be present for any questions or any information that I could possibly provide. But definitely a worthwhile discussion, and just wanted to make myself available. Thank you.
Thank you, Jordan. And we'll now go to Craig Mooney on, actually this will be on item 53, so we'll wait, Craig. So I'm sorry, we're on items 2 through 50 right now. Do we have any other speaker request forms on items 2 through 50? On items 2 through 50. Okay, public comment is now closed. So we are now going to consider items 2 through 50, and if any council members would like to pull any items for separate consideration, so far we're going to be pulling items 15, 24, and 26. 15, 24, and 26. John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. 43.
Pauline Sumption.
Number 4, please.
Number 4. Charity.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Numbers 36 and 37, just for general comments, please.
36 and
Or
37?
I could just do one of them. Just the
Just one of
comment will be
them?
the same for both.
Okay. 36? Is that all right, 36? Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. And item number 20, please.
Item number 20. Okay. Do we have a motion to approve the balance of consent? Okay, we have a motion by Scott and a second by Wright to approve items 2 through 50 with the exception of 4, 15, 20, 24, 26, 36, and 43. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. And before we go on, I just want to mention, given the number of items that were pulled from consent and the large stack of speaker request forms that we have here, I would like, if the council will allow, to hear Brandon Packard's item right after we're done with these 5 or 6 consent items. Does anybody have any objection to that?
I so move. So
Okay.
you need a motion.
We'll just do it.
Okay.
If there's no objection, okay, very good. So we will do that, and that will be, Brandon, your item will be 50A. Okay, we are now on item number 4. Pauline.
Thank you, Mayor. We need to correct who the applicant is for the special event license. It's actually for the Young Professionals of Rapid City. And then just as a heads up, as when we do have the public hearing, and if the license is approved, there needs to be a stipulation that the location is restricted to only those shops at Main Street Square that are not currently covered by an alcohol license, because they can't have the overlapping.
Do we have a motion?
So move.
We have a motion by Wright and a second by Peterson. Everyone understands the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item number 15, Ritchie.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 15 is to authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign agreement and release with Don and Jody Bunker concerning replacement of water service line. This item is being pulled because we do not have a funding source, and I'll defer to the council for recommendations on which funding source that we're going to explore.
I make a motion, we pay it based on funds from the water department.
Motion by Wright and a second by? Second by Peterson. Okay. Okay. Any further discussion? Okay, we'll go to Jerry Wright.
Did you have any further questions, Steve, or are you okay with it because our Public Works people are not here tonight? My understanding is, and Mayor, correct me if I'm wrong, they contacted the MDU and all the other parties, and there was no resolution, so it's in our court. Okay, thank you. I'm done.
Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just curious if someone can answer, Jerry or yourself, what the basis is for having it come out of the water enterprise? I wasn't party to those discussions, so I'd appreciate an update.
I would make the motion because it was the water department who was paying to have the contract done. That's where it came from, the change out from the Cleghorn system to the city system. That was the source of funding. Actually, Terry could say exact which department was, because but he's not here, but the water utility was paying for the abandonment of the Cleghorn system and the attachment of these 60-plus homes to the city system. Am I correct? That's the reason. I mean, whoever paid for it ultimately, I think, should pay for the problem. And
Public Works is okay with this?
Yes.
Yes, okay, thank you. That's what I needed to know. I appreciate it.
Just to clarify, they're not enthusiastic, but they're okay about it.
True.
Any further discussion?
But Ken Adell is enthusiastic about it.
Bill Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If we are going to have a motion and perhaps reach into the city coffers to pay for a new line, I'd like to know what action is being taken to preclude this happening again, so we're not once again replacing the line 7 years from now.
Okay, you want me to handle that one?
You can, or I can try.
Let me try it. If I mess it up, you can handle it.
All right.
Let me explain the way the design process is to occur. And something happened in this, and mistakes happen. When the city does a project like this, and Dave maybe can help too, the department decides to do it, and the design is done either internally or externally by a consultant. And normally when it's underground or above ground, but especially underground, they will do what's called a design location of utilities, which would, a lot of times will go through Call One or some of those services, or it may be the utility itself, such as the city or whatever, MDU, CenturyLink, or whoever the utilities are, or they may, like I said, they may use a Call One locator, or they do it themselves. Once all the utilities are located, the design engineer, designing firm will go out and survey the site and determine what's there to the very best of their ability, and that's included on a set of plans. And in that set of plans, when they are designed to construct, routinely they're passed back through for a plans review, and would go through staff, and normally would go through the utilities for also their buy-off and their review. And once all the notes are as needed or included or corrected as needed, then they can go for contract, and then it's built. And once the contract is awarded, the plans are of course used to construct, and the contractor will also use a similar location service to locate where the utilities are and build it, and hopefully avoid hitting any of them. Sometimes things are missed, and apparently that's what happened here. Close enough, Dave? Mayor?
Close enough.
Does that answer your questions, Bill? Well, that's a process that should be followed, and if it is followed, then these things hopefully would never occur. And if you look at the number of projects that are done in a year, there's a lot of them. This is one of the this is an extremely unusual case, and it just got missed. A mistake was made.
I'll
There's
try.
a process.
I'll try if that's okay.
Sure.
Having worked with a phone company, and there's many similarities when it comes to one call, there's several points where this failure could have occurred. It could have occurred with one call. It could have occurred with MDU. It could have occurred with the city, and all three of these entities could be here until the end of time arguing about who's responsible. The bottom line is this: we're not aware that an anode bed has ever caused a problem, but in this case, it appears that it certainly did. There's been one letter already that's gone from the city to MDU asking for some information on this, and now there's going to be a follow-up letter coming sometime soon, making sure that they have the anode beds in their system, and that one call has the anode beds in their system, so that this situation doesn't happen again. So that's what's happening. And you know what?
Forgive me, Mr. Mayor, but an anode is a positive. The water line, being copper, is a conductor. It's a negative. Electricity always flows positive to negative. So if we replace the line with more copper, we've put another ground in, and we've not addressed the problem. So if somebody is about to say, we'll replace it with plastic pipe, grounded pipe, wrapped pipe, something different, then we've addressed the problem. But if we pull the old pipe and put more pipe in, all we've done is given it a new piece of pipe to work on.
I'm sorry, I thought your question was overall, but yes, my understanding with the utilities that they will be either putting in a plastic line or rerouting this where it will not be near or at risk with the anodes. Correct, Ken? The owner's here, that's the plan. It'll be done, so it will not happen again.
Okay, and that was the gist of my
I
question.
thought you were dealing overall, but...
No.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
Very good. Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone understands the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, everyone.
It only costs you $100,000 a year.
Item number 20. Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 20 is to authorize the staff to advertise for bids for Block 75 parking structure renovation at an estimated cost of $300,000. And I'll move to approve.
We have a motion to approve and a second. Pauline, would you like to make a clarification on this item in terms of the funding source? It requires a supplemental.
Correct. This will require a supplemental because it was not previously budgeted. There is cash in the parking lot and area fund that is available for this project.
Very good. Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. May I follow up with Pauline?
You may.
Pauline, so this is going to require a supplemental appropriation to come to the council. So do you have a time frame when the next supplemental appropriation will be coming?
We only do 4 a year now, so you'll probably see first reading in a committee meeting later this month or the beginning of September.
All right. Thank you.
Okay. Any further discussion on this motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are now on item number 24. Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 24 is to authorize staff to purchase a 19,500 GVWR, I knew I was going to blow that, flatbed truck. Estimated cost is $65,000. I'd like to make the motion to authorize staff to advertise for the purchase. Change the word or insert the word advertise for purchase of the 19,500 flatbed truck.
And this will go out for bid.
Yes, advertise for bid, yes.
Do we have a second? We have a motion by Nordstrom and a second by Peterson. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 26. Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 26 is to acknowledge discussion on cost recovery policy for off-site improvements not covered by oversize. I'll move to recommend to staff to come back in 90 days to explore possibilities of doing a cost for oversizing.
Okay. We have a motion by Nordstrom and a second by Roberts to bring this back to
Staff.
Public Works
Yes, in 90 days. Yes.
Can you pick a meeting for us?
Yes, I can.
First Public Works meeting in November?
In November?
Our last one in October?
Let's do the last one in October is October 29th.
October 29. That's okay with the seconder? Okay, any discussion on that? Brad Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think the motion should be cost recovery of costs other than oversize. Not for oversize, but the cost recovery of costs other than oversize, because there already is an oversize agreement. It's the other costs that I think this was.
If that's what I said, I apologize. Yeah, you're correct, Brad. It should be not covered by oversize. Yes, correct.
Any further discussion on item 26? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Now we'll go to item number 36, and we'll go to our Legal and Finance Vice Chair, Bonnie Peterson.
Number 36, approve event permit for Hotel Alex Johnson for motorcycle parking August 2nd through the 11th, 2013. Move to approve.
Motion by Peterson, second by Clayton. We'll go to Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm just curious. I know we've been trying to tighten these up because obviously the rally is swinging right now, and the permit approval starts on August 2nd. Today is August 5th. So just an FYI, I know we've been trying to stay on top of those and get those in the system and done prior to when they need to be approved. So maybe we can tighten that up. Thanks.
Agreed. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We're now on item number 43. Bonnie.
Resolution number 2013-077 to post the Compass Audit Program Chief Auditor position. Move to approve.
Motion by Peterson, second by Doyle, and we'll go to John Roberts.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I would like to make a substitute motion that we approve this and hold on to the candidates that we get while we put out the upcoming audits on an RFP so we can see if it'll be cheaper for the taxpayers to actually do this externally than internally. Thank you.
We have a motion by Roberts and a second by Laurenti. For discussion, everyone understands the motion. We'll go to Jerry Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm going to speak on behalf of the original motion and against the proposed amendment. Here's the reason why. This committee was established, or this effort was to find or have a tool where the council had a mechanism to assist in the oversight of the operation of the city, not only in its efficiency, and there's potential savings whenever you get to efficiency, but compliance with good auditing rules and so forth. And this process is in its infancy. I think to stop now or change it would denigrate everything that's been done to date. We have had talk about open government and honesty and so forth, and I think that there's been a great deal of effort put forward to have this occur. I compare it to like the IG in the Army or the military services. This is a separate arm. It's under our control, the council, to make sure that we have eyes on what happens, and that's our job as council, to make sure the taxpayers' money are spent wisely, carefully, and to assist our managers in our cities in doing a good job. We already have an external auditor, and that is done annually, where their finance reporting process is audited according to state law and process. That's done already. I supported this initially, and I think it was the intent of those that did, that we would build some institutional memory and knowledge within our own staff and with our own people, and rapport with our own managers, that we could get better. I talked to our staff out there today, and I think to blandly just go and get proposals would be defeating. It's not that we can't do them in the future for some audits, but currently they're working at about $50 an hour if you include the entire budget. Our billable right now is $100, so it's cheaper if we do it ourselves. I think right now it would be doing a great disservice to the work of those that have set this in motion. It's too early to do this, and I speak against it, and I ask this council support to hire a replacement for our current auditor and move on for at least another year or two, and let's see what happens. I stand for questions.
We'll go to Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If I can, I would like to ask Mr. Jordan Mason a question or two, if I can.
Sure.
Thank you. Jordan, how you doing?
Good.
Good. Because you were involved with this from its infancy, my questions are, and I've shared my opinion, if you will, with my colleagues up here, and maybe even when you were still on the council at the time. But my concern, and I honestly believe I should have done a much better job of forcing the issue at the time when I came onto the council, but I don't know if we were too far at that point for me to have it included. But my question to you is, do you remember discussion in the putting this committee together, which I support, these types of audits, these types of efforts. But my question to you is the financial impacts, the accountability portion of the committee to exceed its own cost in savings. Was that a discussion?
Yeah, I do remember some of, we obviously had some conversations, you and I and other council members during the time about that. And there is always a fair question of any system. I think this is fair to say there's always a question of accountability and methods to actually enforce certain accountability measures in governments and any form of governance. If I could just expound a little bit more, I think since I've had kind of an interesting year, I've gotten to see city council, I've got to be a part of a company, doing some other things. One of the things that I think is unique about government especially is that your accountability, unlike a private company that has stakeholders and shareholders that are specifically looking at bottom line for dollar, there's also other social impacts that go into decisions from a government standpoint. And prime example, one of the ones that I remember discussing, and there was a fair discussion about this, fair debate, was considering consolidated purchasing and looking at bulk purchasing of certain items for office supplies. Now, from my point of view and looking from a business point of view, that sounds great. On the other hand, from a government point of view, and an argument that was brought to me when I brought that up was, well, what about the local vendors? And specifically, what is the local economic impact if that were to happen and it were to be outsourced to an out-of-state entity? What I think is wonderful about having an audit committee is, and like what I said previously, is that I really think it's a fair discussion to say internal or external, but I'm not willing to say, even tonight, whether that's a good idea one way or the other, because frankly, I don't have the numbers or the data. But that's what's wonderful about having a committee that can do that for you, is to bring the data on the table to make a true objective decision, aside from politics, aside from social pressures, just bottom line, what are the numbers and what do they say? So I do remember those discussions, and I think there's a lot of thought that went into that.
Thank you. And I just wanted to voice my support for the amendment and explain that my support is based on the fact that of the question that I just asked Jordan Mason, and that is that we need to have the data. We need to have the data from the independent auditors, if you will, the outside people, to compare to the number of hours that our internal audit, Compass, if you will spend on it, and compare that to the cost that the taxpayers are paying today for Compass. We don't have that data. We know what we're paying Compass today. That's a fixed cost to the taxpayer right now. And what is difficult for me at this point is the fact that I don't know what Compass is doing as far as financial impact for the taxpayer. If we had the hard numbers that Compass is saving for the taxpayer, and by gosh, it should easily exceed its cost to the taxpayers, we need to have those figures. And the taxpayers deserve to know that this $190,000, I'm just shooting off the top of my head, Pauline, for this next year in 2014, $198,000 that we'll spend on the Compass Committee auditing these very important processes, that the taxpayers see a cost benefit, that there is a cost of savings and time that far exceeds the $190,000 that the taxpayers will spend in 2014 for them to do that. One of those ways, before we even get to 2014, is to compare the cost of what we know Compass is costing us in 2014 compared to what an outside vendor can provide those same audits, what their cost is. And so it at least gives us some groundwork as far as costs before we get to 2014, and that is why I'm supporting the amendment. And I am hoping my colleagues will support it, not because I don't want to see this position filled, because I do want to see this position filled, but I want to have the data, and I want to be able to look at it, and all of us to make an informed decision that is best for the taxpayer. Thank you.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Jordan, can I ask you another question real quick?
Absolutely.
Thank you. Oh, and happy birthday.
Thanks, John.
If the Compass program put some or all of these audits out into the private sector because of your knowledge of what you looked into when you were setting this program up initially, would we as a council lose control of this program?
Absolutely not. And that's actually one of the things, when looking at it, no, absolutely not. You wouldn't lose control whether you have outsourced it or whether it's internal. And I think just to elaborate on that a little bit is, I think there's pros and cons to each side. When looking at the Sioux Falls internal plan, they were able to formulate plans and implement those plans at a much faster rate than other cities who had oversight committees that made oversight/advisory committees that would make recommendations and say we want these things to be audited, and then they'd go out for bid to private enterprises. Because of the state bid laws, if you do it externally, you would have, especially if you do it on a case-by-case basis, you would obviously have to comply with state bid laws, so there would be a time delay before such activity could act. So, I think, there's two different ways of looking at that, but ultimately, you are the employer, so to speak, if it's external, so you would set the rules and they would have to comply with law. And obviously, if it's internal, you still have control. But ultimately, you are the fiduciaries that are responsible of the taxpayers' money, and designating this committee, you thereby have control.
Thank you very much, Jordan. One of the reasons that I even brought this up was when I was looking into how many hours our auditor put into the cash handling audit. It kind of worried me when he told me he didn't keep track of the hours that he put into it. And I think that we need to, as taxpayers, know what this committee is costing us. I like the Compass program. I believed in the Compass program from the beginning, and I think it is a good program and is going to be, hopefully, a great program someday. But I think that it's very important that the taxpayers know exactly where their tax dollars are going. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Jerry Wright.
Since I'm council president, I'm taking the position of defending this program. We already know what our cost per hour of this is, about $47 and change because of the budget divided by the 2 employees. And I believe our billable rate with our current contract with our auditors is how much? Pauline?
I'm sorry, say that again?
How much are we being charged per hour by our current auditors?
I honestly do not have an hourly charge. It is a charge for the audit. So like our annual audit in 2011 was $32,000 plus extra for additional federal programs.
Is it in the area of $100 an hour if they do billable work?
It's if you do a blended rate, because it's going to depend on who's actually working on the audit. The partners that have to work on it are obviously at a higher rate than a staff accountant. So a blended rate would probably be in the $100 an hour range.
So if the council through the Compass Committee decides that we need to look at that, we already have the ability and authority and rate to do it. And I think that's the way to do it instead of messing up this. First of all, if we're going to hire someone, put them on hold, and then we're going to go out and take proposals, we're not going to know exactly what those cost until they're done, and that's going to be 6 months out, 3 months, a year. I think we need to proceed as planned and let the committee handle it and report back accordingly. I ask that the council support the original motion. Thank you.
Bonnie Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I believe the point is correct that this program eventually needs to pay for itself, but this has just started, and so we have not gone through the cycle so far because it's new. They're checking basics, the foundation, so to speak, to get it established. So yes, it should eventually pay for itself, but it's too new. We need at least another year And I think at that time, we can look at it and then see what has taken place. And I understand you want to fight for the taxpayers. I think all of us up here do. But at the same time, it's just all of the undermining of this Compass Committee that's taken place over the last year from members, from people up here on the council, is just really, it just smells, I would say. And it's too early. And to say you've always loved the Compass program, many of you up here have done nothing but try to tear it down from the beginning. And this is just another little stab. And who do you think is going to apply for these jobs? When you see how the previous auditor and people were treated, when you're sitting up here now saying, oh, well, let's try to hire someone, but at the same time, we'll fire them in 3 months. So you just need to be careful, because this audit of comparing that this was 150 hours was not equivalent to what our own auditors have done. It was just one report. So anyway, it just doesn't sit well with me, and I felt I had to say something. Thank you.
Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. Just listening to the discussion up here, it's an interesting concept, and I think it should be considered, especially looking at even doing some of the audits externally. But I think a plan's been set in motion, and I believe the rest of the council's already said that this program itself hasn't even been in existence 1 year. It's coming up on its 1 year when it first started the work. So to say all of a sudden we need to switch oars and go in a different direction seems a little premature to me. So I can't support this motion at this time. I'll be supporting the original motion, but I am open to considering some external audit in the future. That's a concept that I think our auditing staff can take a look at, or the committee can take a look at. Thank you.
John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I didn't realize that looking at different concepts to save the taxpayers' money is undermining the Compass Committee, and I apologize for that. But I do think that, sometime in the future, if it's not showing cost savings, we're going to have to look at other avenues. So thank you.
Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I'm trying to figure out how to address this. Is that we are planning on getting onto our next Compass Committee meeting in 1 week, or 2 weeks? 2 weeks. And I haven't even had a chance or opportunity to sit in on those discussions or opportunities to have this conversation yet. So that for me, the timing is off. I've done some homework on this committee, and I think what it really boils down to, for me, is that we'll need to do some more internal accounting that I've got questions on, and I haven't got answers on them just yet, but what it looks like, John, I should say Alderman Roberts, you've made a good suggestion, is that we don't track the hours. If that's true, then I'd like to have that opportunity to add that into the practice that we're doing if we're not doing it currently. And for me, the other basic core issue is that there seems to be a very poor communication effort going on between the City Council and also with the Compass Committee because of this underlying current that seems to be taking place. So I'd like to have that opportunity to expand or explore some different communication avenues for the Compass Committee. And I've put together a list of suggestions and some things for us to have a discussion at the Compass level. So for me, the timing's just off on this substitute motion, so I'd like to have us move forward with the current program. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Richie. Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. A couple of comments. We've heard tracking hours a couple of times, and I know when we're dealing with interdepartmental charges, we've talked about tracking hours in departments citywide, and it has always come up that it's just not feasible. Compass is not the type of entity that charges out or has billable hours out to different agencies. Therefore, tracking hours is going to just count against the time that they have to go out and do the job that we have set in motion unanimously that they do. Something else to consider in this discussion, last year they started a couple of smaller audits. The cash handling audit is one that keeps getting discussed. The program was supposed to be set up last year, and audits were by rights not supposed to start because the audit plan runs on a calendar year, same as the fiscal year of the city. And yet they got set up a little quicker than we had anticipated, and we didn't want to waste the last quarter of last year, and so we figured out a way that we could get them moving and get some kind of value to the taxpayer. Now, something else to keep in mind is that once those recommendations come forward, Compass is not responsible for the implementation of those recommendations. The executive branch of government is. And so I know we've been talking about gauging what are the dollars that this program's going to be saving, and that's going to be directly proportional to the wherewithal of the executive branch of government to implement those recommendations, whatever they may be, in a timely fashion. Thinking back to some in just the preliminary low-hanging fruit cash handling audit that was finished, some of the recommendations we were told could not be implemented for 6 months, 8 months, 10 months. So that takes the last quarter of last year, the recommendations, and puts them out to the end of this year, before we can actually see the implementation, let alone time passing to see the results. So, you know, we often say in government that things move slow, and then trying to add on an oversight program, it's seeming to run just as slow as the government that it's auditing. Unfortunately, that is the way it's going to be, and that's the reality. So it's just taken a broader perspective, a little more historical. I know that every organization that I spoke with, that Jordan probably spoke with, they all went through these kinds of growing pains. They all went through, yeah, let's do it, pass unanimously, and then the fear and the doubt sets in. And I'll tell you that the ones that stuck with it and let the program do what it's supposed to do have saved significant amounts of money proportional to the size of their jurisdiction. So, you know, to stop a program midstream and hold off on advertising for the chief auditor's position in particular, I think would just be a detriment to the program. I hope that's not the goal. Thank you.
Brad Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm all in favor of saving the taxpayers' money, but I think it's our job to make sure, you know, I don't think it's Compass's job. I think we're going through the budget process right now. It's our job to know where the taxpayers' monies are going. And that's what we're doing through this budget process. Obviously, the first budget process that I've gone through. Now, it's my understanding that Compass's job, they were on board before I was elected, but Compass's job is to annually take certain segments of the government and look at it through a different set of eyes to more detail than we are able to through the budget process. Now, and if we're doing a good job budgeting, you know, I'm all in favor of them finding efficiencies, but to say that it's a failure because, and to say that if they don't find efficiencies that meet how much we're spending on them, that it's a failure, I don't think it's quite right. I mean, if we're that confident that there's that many efficiencies, then we better roll up our sleeves during the budget process. I mean, if you're convinced that we've got those kinds of leaks, I think we better roll up our sleeves and go through a few more line items and stuff. But I just don't think it's fair to them at this infancy of the stage of the deal to say, you have to carry your own weight. I mean, I hope they find some efficiencies that we're missing in things. I want to save the taxpayers' money, but at the end of the day, the buck stops with us through our budgeting process to be accountable to the taxpayers of where the money's going. And I'd like to see it play out a little longer. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to make just a couple of comments before we proceed to a vote, and if I don't make any comments, it will be said that I was behind this discussion anyway, so I'm going to weigh in and make a couple of comments. I want to thank the two council members for bringing up their thoughts. You I have had some concerns regarding the implementation of this program, and I also have had in recent days some very good conversations with council leadership and the new liaisons to the committee. I've expressed my concern about how hard it is to explain to the department heads that they are expected to keep track of their time more, such as the city attorney's office trying to keep track of billable hours, trying to chase down some of our interdepartmental charges. I know my office was asked for a time study last year on how much time I spent on stationery, and we provided that information. And so I think in terms of providing that basic information, I think it is reasonable to provide. I don't think it can be provided today. And I believe that it is seen as a real issue for morale for the rest of the departments for it not to be provided, and it's my understanding that Compass is interested and on their own will be addressing this issue. I want to also address another topic that was brought up during the discussion tonight. It was, if you watch the statements in a certain way, you could come away with the impression that the auditor was run off. That's not true. The auditor is leaving on his own accord, and the city has an opportunity, and I mean the city council, has an opportunity to post the position and at the same time, as I understand the motion, to also go out for RFP and get an idea of how much it would cost to do those audits and still have it supervised by the committee, just like it is in other jurisdictions. And so I think that there's been some very good discussion on this in recent days, and you're certainly welcome to bring this topic forward at the budget, where it's probably more fitting in terms of a discussion. But I want to thank everyone for their comments tonight. I do believe that this program was founded on the premise and promise of finding millions in cost savings, and you can watch the original tapes, and it says that. It's one of the reasons why I was one of the champions for it and continue to be a champion for it. But in order for this program to be successful, it needs to be accountable. There's an old Murphy's Law that a $300 picture tube will blow itself to save a 10-cent fuse, and we do not want that to happen with this program. In order to avoid that, it needs to be accountable. The other concern that was raised regarding this process is the indicators that had been submitted for the budget were blank, and I understand and have been informed by the Compass liaisons that is being worked on, and there will be some very good indicators coming forward to help hold this program accountable, just as the other departments are held accountable. And we'll go to Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. May I make a suggestion for your consideration? Is what I'm hearing from you is that there's some challenges for the department directors with Compass, and if you could put those together within the next couple of weeks, and I would appreciate if they were either in an email or some kind of written form, so that we can take a look at them when we get our Compass committee meeting going, and that'll be our first one. So if we can go through those, have the opportunity to have a written list of your concerns spelled out, and I would be more than willing to bring these up at the Compass committee for review, because to me that's part of the communication that seems to be lacking, and if you need a formal written response to that, I'd be very willing to make that recommendation to our committee to have that in writing back to you.
Thank you, Richie. If I could just briefly respond to that, I think your word is good. In conversations that we've had on this, you seem committed to addressing the concerns that have been raised, and they've been raised by staff members, they've been raised by me, they've been raised by council members, and I appreciate your commitment, and I think that the Compass Committee is moving in the right direction. Bonnie Peterson.
Mayor, when you talked about the morale of staff, could you be more specific? Are you saying that they think that the program's not paying it for itself, so therefore their morale's undermined, or what are you saying?
Well, I can either talk about it here, or I can talk about it with you later, or we can talk about it on KOTA I'm just kidding, on Thursday. It's supposed to smile. Anyway, You know, I think the bottom line is, Bonnie, is that and this was, I think, especially an issue at the budget hearings the other night, and I understand that there's several council members that are going to be asking this, and based on my conversation with Compass liaisons, this is already being worked on in the committee, but the Compass leadership had come forward and said that they didn't know how much time had been spent on an audit, and that's a reasonable information to ask so that you can determine the cost-benefit analysis, and I think that that's fair information to ask as we move forward through the budget process.
Okay. I don't know about that, but I would say that the request for the audit came out of your office, came out of the office of the mayor with, "We want to know." And then up here, you try to pretend that it's the fellow councilmen that want to know, when you yourself have been after Compass since the beginning. And what's your whole point of this, is to embarrass the council or, whatever. But anyway, it just didn't sit well with me tonight, and I won't say any more. Thank you.
We'll go to Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess where I'm kind of thinking right now, Mayor, is that the condition of the morale and everything that Bonnie, Alderman Peterson has brought forward, might I suggest that we talk about that verbally, and if you want to put it in writing too, I'd be willing to hear that, but if we can have just a conversation to get that started in the communication level, I would encourage that rather than having the discussion here at the dais. I don't mind having the discussion, but I think as far as assessing the employees' morale is not for this venue right now. At this time is not the correct time to do that. So, but if it needs to be talked about in the future, I would encourage that instead of doing it currently, right now. Thank you, Mayor.
Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And from the comments that I'm hearing, I think there's a lot of my colleagues that are mistaking this motion, and my second is not to slow down Compass. It's not to stop the hiring of this position. I think that was clarified. This is to start telling the success story of Compass. All of us who support Compass, some more than others, because of where we're at this point, it's because of the fact that we cannot tell the story, the success story that we're going to have with Compass if we cannot ascertain its financial impact. There is no way for us to communicate as a council to the citizens if we do not have a signed financial impact, say signed off by the finance officer of the city, saying, yes, this audit that was completed at the end of June of 2014 had this type of financial impact. If we can't do that, if we can't come up with that story, that specific data, it's always going to be this. It's always going to be this banter back and forth. There's no way we can make this project or this effort that is successful without being able to say, Compass did this for us in 2014. They saved the taxpayers X. If we can't say that, we're going to have these bad conversations we're having right now. There's going to be the side that says, let's let them do what they do and just let them do what they do. But we can't do that. We have to be accountable to the taxpayers. We have to say, Compass cost us $190,000 in 2014, and it saved us. That's what we're going to be able to say today. Nothing. We can only have this banter and debate that, it's doing the taxpayers a lot of good. But we can't do that. We have to be more accountable to the taxpayer. And I, for one, want to see this amendment, not to slow it down, not to not hire this position, because we will do that. But we need to be able to tell the story of success for Compass by giving some very hard numbers, not only cost, but benefit. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. And we'll go to Amanda Scott, who's not spoken on this issue. Oh. Well, everyone else has spoken 3 times. So
Okay, thank you, Mayor. I just want to call the question.
Question's been called. Any objections to calling the question? Everyone understands the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. It was a substitute. It was a substitute motion.
Oh, I thought you were doing
No, there was no objections to calling the question. Okay, well, let's do a roll call. We're still in
Do a
time. so-
reconsideration? Would it be
The
cleaner to
motion
do a
is to
reconsideration?
approve the hang on a second. The motion is to approve the substitute motion. Go ahead.
Doyle.
The motion was to approve.
Motion is to approve. The substitute motion is on the floor, and, excuse me, that is to approve going out for the candidates, but to hold on doing the candidates while RFPs are issued on pending audits to determine the most cost-effective process.
Well, considering hiring takes many months, I'm going to say no.
Wright. No. Scott. No. Nordstrom. No. Roberts. Yes. Clayton. Yes. Lorente.
Yes.
Estes. No. Peterson. Motion fails 3-2. What do we have here? 6? Can't count that fast.
We're back to the original motion,
Which is to approve.
which is to approve. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, very good. Thank you, everyone. We're now at the end of consent. We will now go to item 50A. Brandon, thank you for your patience. And Steve, would you track down Jeff Barbier, please? We need to have him in here for this discussion. Pauline, can you help us with what the motion would be so we can, Jeff, this is 50A. This is the item on the invoice for the abatement that Brandon Packard received while on deployment.
Would you like me to clear what it should be? If you guys choose to approve his request, which would be to basically write off the debt to the city, then it would be a motion to write off that debt. Well, just a second. I know you asked for clarification what the motion should be. I want you to know that what he has been billed outside the $42, the administration charge, they're actual charges that the city has been charged by the contractor. So if, in any case, not just this case, if it is written off or abated, if it gets into the hearing stage and the special assessment stage, the taxpayers end up paying for it. So as a finance officer, I want to make you aware of that as well. Thank you.
Can you hit your light, please?
I make the motion that the city absorbs the entire cost, whatever that takes to do it, on the basis.
We have a
but this-
second?
Thank you. And may I continue?
You may.
You were 8,000 miles away, kind of hard to come home and mow, isn't it?
Sir.
I think that we as a community are making an effort to show our support to you and to any and all that have been deployed. And I apologize, our city was just doing their job, and they're doing what they do, but as a salute to you and all those that have served, I make the motion to forgive.
Out of council contingency? I would recommend that that's where it come from.
That's a
but-
good place to take it, yes.
Okay. And that's okay.
Take it out of my wallet if you have to, but.
The other suggestion was the council travel fund, but we'll go with council contingency. So, and we had a second for that?
Yes.
Any further discussion? Do we need to have 3 people speak on this?
I'm just glad you moved it, because this guy
All
stood in
right.
line long enough. in his
Looking
career.
forward to some
He needs to go home.
cancellations. But Bill, go ahead.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I'll try to keep this very short. This is not the first time we've had a situation like this, and I think not only do we clear up this one, but we need to do something moving forward to ensure that when notices go out, they arrive to the intended recipient before we act. I think there's something a little bit out of control and perhaps premature when we engage a contractor and send them to a property and have them do work that creates a cost, and we find out that the person who lives there has never received any piece of paper until such time that the job is done, and their first notification is a bill upon completion. So we have an issue that, okay, and I see Joel shaking his head, so I'll be quiet and maybe it's Joel's turn to talk.
Joel and Dean.
The council actually, I think within the last year by ordinance, decreased the time frames required. I mean, there is a balance between trying to notify the property owner so they can take care of it themselves and not letting a nuisance continue indefinitely while we make lots of efforts to try to get a hold of them when in this situation they're frankly not very easy to get a hold of at this point. So it used to, I believe, be 10 days before you could mow somebody's lawn if the weeds or if the grass had gotten too tall, and you actually voted to decrease that to 5 days because, again, we had many of the neighbors who were upset that it took that long to get something done. We have a lot of military people in this town, and I understand your motivation, but keep in mind this situation, when you're deployed or when you leave, you need to make accommodations to take care of your yard and make sure that's all taken care of. And I understand sometimes that just doesn't happen, but that's why we got in the situation we did. We send notice to the last known address. We don't have the staff time to obviously hunt down everybody and make sure that they actually receive notice. We do the best we can, and it doesn't always work, but we have a certain time frame, and if it isn't taken care of within that time frame, then we go out and abate it ourselves.
Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I applaud you, and I thank you for your service. And you can look around the room in here because just in the short time that you first presented this to this discussion now, at least 2 people in that audience offered to pay it for you. So thank you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. I applaud you, Mr. Packard, for your service to the country. Thank you very much. And I'm going to be supporting this, but I just wanted to clarify to the council, too, that we've run across similar situations with other, such as vehicles that were in a poor condition state, and they needed to be addressed as well. And we found out in some of those cases that the owners were on military deployment of some kind. The staff was able to deal with that on their level, and I'm not sure, this is probably one of those things that because of the timing situation, it got to this level. So normally this, I believe, can be handled at staff level and let them try to do this. And if there's a fix that we need to address on it, hopefully we can address that, come forward with a possible resolution. And thank you for bringing this up so we have an opportune time to have a further discussion on it. And plus we also have the SEBA board in place, so there is that opportunity. I understand there's some legal requirements and state legislation stuff involved in that, but I think we can avoid all of that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie. And my understanding is that this could have gone to the Code Enforcement Board of Appeals had not the services of abatement already been delivered. Pauline Sumption, our finance officer.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to do a little further clarification on Mr. Clayton's question. By state statute, we are required to send notices to the property owner and the address on record with the county. And so whether it's military or not, if that address has not been updated, if they have not forwarded their address to their mailing address, it still goes to the old address. So we follow state statute and how we deliver the notices. And again, like Joel indicated, we can't follow up on those to see if they've actually been delivered. There's no other way for us to know who the owner is or their mailing address.
Any further discussion on the motion? Bill.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Sergeant Packard, you've heard the discussions up here. Could you elaborate just a little bit? Was somebody in the home? Do you have a personal question? Was her wife perhaps left behind, or maybe she was moved to a designated location while you were gone? But just so we know.
Yes, for clarification purposes, my wife goes home to stay with family in Kentucky when I deploy. This happens every time I go home, or I go forward. We had our mail forwarded. To answer your question, our mail was forwarded. The first one was sent to the wrong address. Although a person did come to our house to look to see that we had the weed, so there's the number right there on the side of the house, so that could have been avoided as well. The second one was returned to the party who sent the message, so they knew that it had not received met it to the intended recipient. However, nothing was done beyond that. if we were notified and had been forwarded appropriately, I would have got one of my neighbors to take care of it. It's not a big deal. And if I'd had a yard, which, like I said, dirt, brand new house. So dirt, nothing there. I leave, everything's good. Come back, it was terrible. So I don't know if that answered your question, sir.
Yes, very much so. Thank you.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on the motion? Everyone understands the motion? Pauline, could we add this to tonight's bill list also? Or this,
Quite frankly, if the council is taking action to waive it so it's getting paid out of council contingency instead of just being forgiven completely, there's no check to cut. It's something that we just internally would do.
Very good. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We are now on public comment for items 51 through 74. Items 51 through 74. And we'll start with public comment for item number 53, and we'll go to Craig Mooney. Mr. Mooney, thanks for your patience.
Sorry. Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen of the board, I'm a pigeon keeper. I raise pigeons. I heard Thursday about the proposition to do away with the loft permit. Up to that time, I didn't know that you had to have a loft permit. $5 is cheap for a loft permit. I come in Friday and tried to get a permit. Nobody could find one. So I was not issued one. I talked to the attorney, and he said with this going in front of the board that one probably wouldn't be issued. I don't know why you're trying to get rid of the loft permit. Somebody has said because it's the feral pigeons that are around town. My birds are not feral pigeons. Most pigeon fanciers, and they keep everything from racers to performance birds to show birds, and they can range from a few dollars up to several $1,000s. A bird was just sold to a Chinese man for the sum of $325,000. This bird won one of the major races in the, I believe it was overseas, but he purchased that bird for $325,000. The birds I raise are performance birds. They are called rollers. They fly in a kit of about 10 birds, 20 birds, and they do a backward somersault. And they do this 30, 40 times and will drop out of the sky 30 or 40 feet on a good bird. Some only drop 10, 20 feet. I don't fly my birds. I only have 6 birds at this time. I'd like to get that up to 10 with a permit. I would gladly do whatever is required to keep my birds. I've got some information here. In particular, this one here, it has a, what's called, this is put out by the AU. That is the American Racing Pigeon Union. They've been in being for, early 1900s. And this is called the Model Ordinance. I know you have the ordinance, and if you're concerned about pigeons, the health of pigeons and whatnot, this goes into, and there is not a disease or a parasite, anything of that nature. It's called a zoonote. Pigeons do not have a in common vector with human beings. You cannot catch a disease from a pigeon. Many old wives' tales say that you can, but it's untrue. There's veterinarians, there's a list of veterinarians here that will vouch to that. But in this model ordinance, and which is not in the city ordinance, which I think should be, it is you have to belong to one of the major pigeon clubs, either the AU, NPA. The AU has put out a lot of information concerning keeping pigeons in the cities and whatnot. New York City has a lot of pigeon keepers. They put their lofts on top of buildings. And every city, I bet every city in the nation has a feral pigeon problem. The only way you get rid of them is poison. You want poison out there for your cats and dogs to get a hold of. Why? Trapping. You can trap them, but they always seem to come back. As long as there's a food source, people feeding them in their backyards and whatnot, you'll always have the pigeons. But there is another section in here, and I want to read it. It says, on application signed by the owner.
Craig, if you could wrap up your comments. In
Okay,
30 seconds,
it's
please.
3 minutes. I can cover, I could hours on this, and what I want to know is why are you trying to get rid of the permit? If I'm going to be able to have a permit, or what is going on with the topic? I know nothing about what's going on with it or anything else at this time.
Once we get through the rest of the public comments, then we'll come back to item 53, and then we'll be addressing that
Okay,
concern.
could I leave this?
Sure may. We will go to Ken Vogely on item 65.
Mr. Mayor and council members, thanks for the opportunity to speak here. First of all, I want to congratulate the city for putting the discussion of uranium mining on the agenda. I'm both for and against this issue in one way or another. I'm against the company PowerTech doing in situ uranium mining, and I am in favor of the city of Rapid City taking a stand against PowerTech. I think the issue is fairly simple, really. First of all, we have too little water. Everybody in this room knows that, because every other day you can't water your lawn. So we're in a continuous conservation mode, which we should be in. So we don't need a company utilizing huge amounts of water that we don't have, really. Rapid City uses some of the same formation that PowerTech will get its water out of. Second of all, there's plenty of uranium in the world. The amount of uranium that PowerTech will get from South Dakota is not a drop in the bucket compared to the world's supply. And then the next two issues have to do with contamination. Talk is cheap. A company can say that they won't cause nuclear contamination, and they can say that they will clean up after they're done, but we have Superfund issues in this country, which it costs the taxpayers a huge amount of money. And in this case, contamination with radioactivity is even worse than just destroying the environment. So I think that Rapid City should go on record strongly against PowerTech or any other company coming into South Dakota and doing uranium mining. Thank you.
Thank you, Ken, and we'll briefly go to Charity Doyle. Go ahead.
Thank you. See if I can get back on track here. Mr. Mooney? You asked a question about why we were looking at this. We had a recent discussion on chickens. There was an advocacy group asking us to allow the keeping of hens in the backyards. And one of the questions that was raised was, well, we have this pigeon ordinance. How many people have actually ever pulled a permit for pigeons? And the answer was 0. So we felt that it was an unnecessary ordinance on the books, and we've been systematically trying to clean those up as we come across them. So it's not a conspiracy, it's not feral pigeons, it's not anything like that, trying to punish the people keeping them. We had no record that anyone was keeping them. So, the next question would be, how many folks out there are actually keeping pigeons, didn't know that they needed a permit? So there's a lot of things that I think it's going to change our discussion a little bit. We have one, but I just wanted you to know that in case you didn't want, this is going to be quite a long night, so I just wanted to give you the option of sitting and waiting through to get to this item, where we will probably have that discussion colored a little bit differently than we maybe would have in the past. So you have that option to stay or leave and watch at home. So just wanted to let you know.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
All right, we will now go to Clay Uptain on item 65.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for hearing us on the uranium mining issue tonight. My name is Clay Upton, and this is the first time I've ever spoken or attended the City Council. I must say I've never in my life seen a better looking group of people.
Well, thank you very much.
So I'm here tonight representing Dakota Rural Action, and we are a 25-year-old statewide grassroots organization with around 500 active members statewide. Most of them are farmers and ranchers, and many of them are generations South Dakotan farmers and ranchers. The Black Hills chapter of Dakota Rural Action has over 100 active members, and I am the current chair of the Black Hills chapter of Dakota Rural Action, having been preceded by Susan Nolan. And our membership has grown recently due to the uranium mining issue. And I have to tell you, every time that we talk to people about it, they're very concerned. And so we are concerned about the quality and the quantity of water in the Black Hills. And our South Dakota State Board Chair, Paul Siemens, who's a real rancher, I wish he could be here tonight, because he looks and talks like a South Dakotan rancher. He, keeps saying that water is the new gold. And so it's really something for us to consider what's happening with the quality and the quantity of the water in the Black Hills. So when I was obtaining a master's in public administration, notice how I slipped that in, we talked a lot about cost-benefit analysis. And the potential cost of the proposed uranium mining far outweighs the potential benefit. The actual fact is there has never, ever been a uranium mine anywhere that didn't have problems. That's the actual fact. And make no mistake, water and land contamination from uranium mining is forever. You know how every Christmas we hear diamonds are forever? Well, I'm here to tell you uranium contamination is forever. We're not opposed to economic development. We just want safe and healthy economic development. Rapid City does benefit from tourism dollars. We've been circulating a petition to the South Dakota State Tourism Board, and we already have over 1,300 signatures on that petition from people who live and who come to this area for tourism. So let's protect our existing businesses and the appealing aspects of our wonderful city and for the surrounding areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Clay, and we'll now go to Richard Drager on item 65.
Hello. My name is Rich Drager, and I'm on one of the people on the petition to block the mining by PowerTech in Edgemont area. And I'm opposed to it for the reasons that were stated by Ken and Clay, as far as your need to consider the water. We're talking about a really great resource that we need to protect. And right now with the drought that's being threatened by scientific sources like the Palmer Drought Index. It indicates that the projections are that the amount of water loss is going to be much greater into the future, and we're going to obtain levels worse than the drought of the 30s. And we're talking about giving water to a Canadian company that is making money without paying us taxes. They're draining a resource that belongs to the people of South Dakota and giving nothing back for it. It's a company that's a fly-by-night operation. They have never done this kind of mining before. They have no reputation in the area. They were a corporation that was made, reversed engineered out of another company, and they basically are having problems with financing. Their stockholders are losing money like crazy, some of them which of the people are investors in South Dakota who maybe have an interest to protect, and might have a conflict of interest. But we're talking about a need here to look at the situation and look at the interested parties, follow the money, and look at the responsibility that the council has. Now, there's other city councils in the country that have passed resolutions against this kind of mining in Virginia and the Hampton Roads area, and they blocked a major initiative by a mining company to overturn a moratorium on uranium mining there. And these are all things that you're going to find that the public is going to become very aware of your actions and your decisions in this area. And there are health considerations that need to be viewed, because the state of Colorado Medical Society basically came out against uranium mining, and they basically led to the failure of the PowerTech initiative in the Centennial mine down in Colorado. And with that, they decided to come to South Dakota. And guess what? The regulations that were used by Colorado to get rid of PowerTech basically were the same regulations that the state of South Dakota had before, but got rid of conveniently. Kind of interesting why we would lose regulations and another state would adopt them to protect their citizens. So you need to ask yourself, what's going on here? Why are they picking on us in South Dakota? They think we're weak? They think we're vulnerable? So I think we need to look at this and examine this issue very carefully and consider a resolution by this city council opposing this kind of mining and also the water usage primarily, and have our hydrologists and the city engineers investigate this, and have a study done to determine the effect this is have on our future water availability. Thank you.
Cheryl Rowe, also on item 65. Cheryl.
Hi. Thank you. I just want to say, first of all, this is the first time I've ever done this, and I'm very nervous, and I would much rather be doing a dozen other things than this, spending my time. We all love living here in Rapid City and the Black Hills region. It's a wonderful place to live, or we wouldn't be here. We appreciate the work that you do. We need our council to be diligent in keeping our water and air clean and safe for the present and for the future generations. I'd just like to say tourism works. We all know that. I know my job depends on tourism dollars. Uranium mining does pollute, and I don't think we can have both. I think we would lose the tourism dollars if we allowed uranium mining to happen here in our wonderful, clean, beautiful place we live. So I just ask you to please do everything that you can, because we as citizens really can't do that much, and we expect and hope that you will take care of us and keep our water safe. And we can live without uranium, but we can't live without good water. Thank you.
Thank you, Cheryl. And we'll go to Gina Parkhurst. Gina.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and members of the Rapid City Council. My name is Gina Parkhurst. I live in Ward 3, and I've been a homeowner here in Rapid City for the past 7 years. I last spoke in this forum on July 1st. And when I was here, I expressed my concerns about the high likelihood of PowerTech's proposed ISL uranium mine to cause permanent water contamination. No ISL uranium mining operation has been able to return water quality to pre-mining cleanliness. I'm not opposed to mining of any sort if it can be proven to be harmless to our water supply. Yet with uranium mining, we need to keep in mind the fact that the half-life of uranium is 4.5 billion years. That's billion as in boy. None of us would outlive contamination that might occur. Untold numbers of the unborn would be affected. Since Rapid City's water supply could be directly impacted, I appreciate your concern about this matter. I'm hoping that you will put forth some sort of a resolution as other cities have done. And I want to thank you for taking my concerns and other area residents' concerns seriously, because I do enjoy living here and I would like to live here for a very long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gina. And we'll now go to Jim Peterson, also on item 65. Good evening, Jim.
Good evening, Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. Where to begin? This is a huge issue, and the science and the engineering is so vast that I just can't cover it in 30 minutes or 3 hours, much less 3 minutes. But if you have any questions at all, we have PhD-level people that could brief you thoroughly on those issues. I'd like to touch on just two basic issues in this 3 minutes. One is this economic development issue. The people that have stood up, hundreds of them, and said we're against this mining in Edgemont have been accused of being anti-economic development. Nothing can be further from the truth. I mean, if you look in South Dakota, what we do here, of course we do banking, but we basically do tourism and agriculture and the service industries that support those. Mining is a tiny fraction of that overall economy. And if you take away granite and clay and gravel and the little oil we produce, hard rock mining is a teeny tiny fraction. So even if the best case scenario that PowerTech paints about jobs and tax revenue and so on comes into actually happens, and then the worst case scenario or the best case scenario for us is that it doesn't cause any great problem. Why would we risk our entire economy, everything we rely on the Black Hills, for really very little in return? You can compare it to the Gilt Edge mine, which is a Superfund site, and it's recent, 1988, that they came up with very similar numbers as far as full-time job equivalents and revenue stream for taxes. And 8 years later, it's a Superfund site. We spent tens of millions of dollars to clean up thus far with no end in sight. And if you look at the Whitewood Creek, I mean, it's an arsenic plume that goes all through the creek, Belle Fourche River, Cheyenne River, all the way down to Lake Oahu. No end in sight. Who's paying for that? Us. So I guess that's the issue. Is I appreciate you, Sam, having the city engineer look and saying, is this going to affect our water? Well, maybe not immediately. And but the issue is that really even the right question at the moment? What about our economy? What's going to happen when the ranchers who rely on the artesian flow, which is not protected by the state law, what happens when that goes dry because these 1,000 wells pumping 9,000 gallons a minute pump them dry? What happens when there's a hazmat spill? I mean, who's going to respond to that? I mean, where's the nearest hazmat response team? Here. What's going to happen? And so who's going to oversee all this? The EPA? I mean, the EPA has one guy in Denver in Region 8 to oversee 5 states. And the legislature took us, as to say, our DENR out of the loop entirely. They have no oversight whatsoever. And that's our concern, is the process. There's no transparency at all. Why in 2011 did Senate Bill 158 take them out of the loop when the head of the DR said that it wasn't going to save a dime. They weren't going to lose a position. All we did was lose a set of eyes. So we can't rely on our state legislature. We have to rely on somebody to look after our interests, so we're turning to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And we'll go to Jillian Anawati.
Hello, thank you for, thank you for having this on your agenda. My name is Jillian Anawati. My husband and I bought or are working with a bank to own our home for about 3 years in Rapid City and Robbinsdale. And I've lived here my whole life, and I love Rapid City for many, many reasons. And I appreciate you as a council for taking an interest in this serious issue. You've heard from a couple of members of Dakota Rural Action up here earlier. I am a staff person for Dakota Rural Action, so I second everything that they said as well. And thank you, Mayor and Mr. Wright, for your letters to the DENR and that foresight and leadership. I'm going to keep this short and also urge you to come together with a resolution and voice a strong opposition to this PowerTech uranium mine until it be proven safe with adequate provisions for our water and protection for our Rapid City water, public health, and economy, with state bonds, state monitoring and enforcement, penalties for spills and violations. Oppose it until it can be proven to not have any negative impact on our quality of life in Rapid City now and in the future. And I'll just end with a little quote by Dr. Perry Ron. You might be familiar with him. He's a local, saying that the groundwater chemistry of this aquifer will have been disturbed. It's like walking by a hornet's nest. The hornets are in there, and we just kicked the nest. So again, I urge you to protect what we don't necessarily know is going on underneath there. Thank you.
Thank you, Jillian. And we will now move into item number 67, and we have quite a few speaker request forms on this. We'll start with Jim Leach, and just so our Roy in the sound booth knows, the next one will be Linda Lee Viken. If you have her video, we'll go to her after Jim Leach.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, ladies and gentlemen. I know you've had a long evening so far, and you have more in store. I'll come right to the point. I came to Rapid City 36 years ago, and when I found out, I'm a lawyer here, when I found out about this project, I asked Elizabeth if she would allow me to volunteer to help, and kindly she did. And that's why I'm here, because I think it's a great project. Tonight I want to address the objections that have been made. And as I have heard them, there are basically three objections, and those three objections are location, location, and location. The first location objection is that there's a safety issue with this project in this place. Well, I think we all know the Sioux Indian Museum was there, the Madison Cabin was there. Currently there's a gorgeous rose garden, there's a war memorial, and there's a relatively busy Parks and Recreation Department. And I fail to see how this project will create any more of a public safety danger than all those other projects have, which I think is slim to none. It's just not designed to draw a lot of people. You walk around the city and you see the presidential statues, and typically you see a person here, a family there, looking at them. You don't see massive hordes of people. And so I just don't see that as being a realistic objection. Second location argument is that it shouldn't be there because this is Halley Park. And when I hear that objection, I think, well, why not? We've had all these other uses of Halley Park. This use is at least as appropriate as those other uses. It would not denigrate the other uses in any way. And so the fact that it is Halley Park alone, I think, doesn't prove anything. And then the third location objection is basically that these statues would be better placed somewhere else, such as Journey Museum. Some of the comments say put them at Mother Butler Center. One of the comments even says put it up at Crazy Horse Memorial. Well, I think our society rejected that concept of group interaction many, many decades ago. And I mean the concept where we'd all be better off if we all just stuck to the people most like ourselves. I think we all benefit as a society and a group when we interact with people who are different than we are. When groups don't interact, it ends up with them being suspicious of each other and fearful of each other. And the more we know of other groups, the better. These 4 people who are proposed to be honored are truly spectacular achievers in the 20th century. They're not Indians with horses and feathers, as the cliche stereotype of Indians so often is, but they tell a story of Native Americans in the 20th century that is a story that we all can learn from. I think it's an excellent location, and it's excellent because it does get so much traffic, because people will go by there and see and know that this is something that Rapid City, at no cost to itself, has chosen to allow to, end of my sentence, to, because I see my red light, has chosen to allow to recognize and commemorate what these people have done. Thank you.
Thank you. And we'll now go to Linda Lee Viken, who is testifying by video.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm sorry to have to talk to you in this manner, but I'm having surgery on my foot on Monday, and I did consider coming on crutches to get the sympathy vote, but I decided that probably wasn't the right thing to do. But I'm here because I would like to support the Native American Sculpture Garden and its placement in Halley Park. You know, for most of the last century, Halley Park was home to the Sioux Indian Museum and the Menelusahan Pioneer Society collections. The park has long been a public space to celebrate regional history and culture, and therefore the placement of this sculpture garden there as a place for reflection is extremely appropriate. And I don't share the concern that some people have about whether there's going to be a parking problem there. I don't see that as an issue that should make a difference as to the placement of the sculptures. The people that have been selected for depiction in this sculpture garden are of historic importance, and they'll enrich the American history experience that we have created by the presidential sculptures that line the streets of Rapid City. Supporting this project and its placement in Halley Park will recognize the blending of distinctive cultures that is a part of our experience here in Rapid City, South Dakota. And I urge your favorable consideration of this project. It's an important one to the people who are asking of you to place it there, and it's important to all of us because of the message that it sends and what it adds to our community. Thank you.
And we'll now go to Dr. Kevin Weiland, also on item 67.
Mr. Mayor, Council, I'm Dr. Kevin Weiland. I'm a Rapid City physician here, and I just want to show my support for this. There's one man in this, is Dr. Eastman. He's not just a role model for me, but he's a role model for a lot of Native Americans. I can see this statue going up in honor of him and what he has done, not just as a physician, but as a community leader, and what he can do to save his memory, but more importantly, to inspire our youth, more importantly, our Native American youth, to maybe go into medicine. I'll keep it short. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Doctor. And Hanny Shafi, I skipped you earlier. You had stepped out. Would you like to speak on item 66? I'll recognize you now if you'd like to.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor and council members. I would like to request continuation of item 66, just to allow it to be heard with the, that's the one on the sidewalk item, to allow it to be heard with the sidewalk on Highway 44. And as far as the sculpture, since we're involved with it, I think we will be very happy to address any concerns that you may have relating to the parking or the traffic since we donated sometimes for that issue, and I think it is good for our community, and we'll be happy to address any concerns you may have. Thank you.
Thank you, Hanny. And we'll go to Margie Jurens on item 67.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. I'm one of the great-granddaughters of James Halley II that donated the park to the city. And we have written letters and we have spoken to the Park and Recreations Board and stuff, so I'm not going to go down that trail again. Our great-grandfather, James Halley II, donated land for Halley Park with the understanding that it to be enjoyed by all peoples. Let's keep Halley Park as a beautiful Victorian flower garden that fits in so well with the West Boulevard theme. With the high volume of traffic and unsafe conditions for pedestrians, the Halley family feels this is too dangerous of a location for such a meaningful sculpture garden to be placed. One of our cousins, dear friend, lost her little 2-year-old child over there. He wandered into the street and was hit and killed. So that's why we're so concerned about it. And then in 2010, as a family, we met at the park to go down to the west end of it to have our photo taken at the Halley Park sign. And it was horrendous to try to get the elderly down there, and then we couldn't even hear each other talk down there because it was so loud because of the traffic. So we feel that a rose garden there is beneficial for people driving by because flowers are therapeutic, even though you don't realize it when you're driving by. It's just a nice thing to have there. We can assure you that people are interested in all types of history, and they will come to view this sculpture garden. Why build this native sculpture garden if you feel people will not come to see it? Is this native sculpture garden something that should be proudly shown or be hidden away by placing it in a dangerous location? Please think long and hard about the safety issues that are involved with Halley Park being the location for the native sculpture garden. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll go to State Representative Kevin Killer. Kevin?
Thank you, members of the City Council, and it is an honor to address all of you. The time limit, is it 3 minutes?
3 minutes.
Okay, 3 minutes, okay. So in the legislature, we get as much time as we want, but I'll have to be kind of fast, so it makes city government a little bit more efficient. But first, let me introduce myself. Habadaki Api, Maka Ichili Ahime, Chante Washe Napi Chuzapilo. That's our traditional greeting in Lakota, and I shake your hands with a warm and good heart. And I just want to come to the committee and council today and just, say that I really do support this project. And I think, I was thinking about the last time I had the opportunity to testify, and I talked about how Black Elk Speaks was a big inspiration. And the way that I read Black Elk Speaks was actually in detention. And I wasn't fighting or anything, but I was actually going there because I was late to class a couple times. And one of the, so part of that, part of my detention was actually to pick out a book that I wanted to read. And this is when I was growing up in Denver and things like that. So I wasn't really as connected to my community as I was, but through that book, I learned about our experience, our shared relationship. Also, how Black Elk was able to kind of translate his vision into a world community. And I think that's one of the main things that I remember the most about this is the fact that, that world vision was born right here in South Dakota. And the fact that, we're able to kind of share that vision with the rest of the world is a really great opportunity, not only to showcase this, but the other great authors like Brian DeLoria, Oscar Howe, who did really great art, and also Dr. Charles Eastman, as what was previously testified, was the fact that, we need a lot more Native people in medicine. And, I also think about the experience that I just had is being in the legislature, and being able to convey our stories, being able to talk to both Native and non-Natives about, our common experiences and, how do we work better towards those goals. And, I think this proposed sculpture garden is actually going to be a good step, and also the courage that it takes for a council to make this step. So when, there's a future Kevin Killer, some growing up, let's say in Salt Lake City or Denver or something like that, and they're able to come to Rapid City and say, wow, which council actually had the courage to step up and do this? what's council was able to kind of see past all these, historical, sometimes negative relationships. Well, how do we start building those bridges? And I think we have the opportunity tonight. And also, I just want to say thank you again for being, taking this matter up, and thank you for hearing me. And, sorry I was late. I was at dinner, and I was meeting with the Vice President of the Northwest Area Foundation, Gary Cunningham. So it was his birthday. So that's what, so you're kind of trying to get me away. So anyway, but I do thank you for taking this time to do this, and I'll stand by if there's any questions. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Representative. We'll go to Kristen Standard, also on item 67.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Thank you so much for all the work you do. I saw your big long list, and I know it's hard work. So I'll try to be brief as well. I represent Black Hills Bronze. I am a resident of Pennington County, but not Rapid City. I live outside Hill City, and we have a foundry called Black Hills Bronze, which does most of the monumental artwork in this area. We opened in 2006, and so we're honored to do most of the presidents that you see on the street, or I think over half of them. About half had already been installed by the time we opened. It's been a really wonderful experience to work with all the local artists here and various committees who are involved in these kinds of projects. I would like to offer my expertise in this area for any kinds of questions you might have about the logistics of placing monumental artwork in public, but also there's sort of more to the story beyond the logistics or the physical aspect or the technical aspect of creating public art. Basically what we're doing as a foundry is something that no foundry ever has done, as far as we know, in this country or the continent, and that is reaching out to communities, organizations, universities, hospitals, whoever it might be, to help them create projects that are needed to be there. We call it Art Connexus. It's a division of our company, and we talk to artists around the entire country, and they're saying this has not happened before. What we're realizing is that communities do have a responsibility in how they choose and interact with the artwork and the public statements they make. And so in order to do that efficiently, it sometimes is, of course, you have to look at what's brought to you and make decisions, as you will do tonight about this one. But also there's a responsibility to reach outward and see what you want to have happen in your community. And that's how we're helping communities all around this region, and hopefully in a wider area as well. It's actually working really well because there isn't anyone who's talking about this. We're basically helping a community act almost like a curator to look at what they already have and then to see what their history suggests that they do, to help them say what history is here or what statements do we need to make. And so that's how we've been helpful. Sometimes art can be placed anywhere, wherever there's a great spot or something like that. And sometimes a particular piece of art needs to be in a particular place. For example, we are trying to help get a sculpture in Newtown, Connecticut, and we are working with James Van Nuys to assist with the police memorial. In this case, it's very likely that Haley Park is the right location for reasons that predate Mr. Haley. And so I urge you to think about the bigger picture in terms of how you think about these things, and I will be happy to help you if you would like me to, because that's one of the jobs we do. It is a complex issue for you. I appreciate that. There are a lot of voices here. So let me help if I can. I appreciate your hard work.
Thank you very much, and we'll now go to A. Gay Kingman. Gay Kingman. Good evening.
Hello. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, City Council members. I'm Gay Kingman. I'm the Executive Director of the Great Plains Tribal Chairmen's Association. That's an association of tribes in the states of South Dakota, North Dakota, and Nebraska. There's 16 tribes in those 3 states. And we support this project. And we're very proud that these 4 members of our Sioux Native people have been selected Vine Deloria is from the Standing Rock Sioux tribe. If you're familiar with that, that tribe is a large tribe. It's in both North Dakota and South Dakota. And Ben Black Elk, of course, or Black Elk is from Oglala, 80 miles from Rapid City, on the border of the reservation, and as is Dr. Eastman. And then, of course, the other person is from the Crook Creek tribe, which is between Pierre and Chamberlain, if you don't know. But we very well support this project. We think it's a good area because this is historically an area that Indian people lived. And it was 78 years ago that the Sioux Museum was designated and built. And it's really hard to demonstrate the heart of our feelings for that area. It was, of course, it was Indian country, but then it was designated as where the Sioux Museum was. The collection was eventually moved to the Journey Museum, but that place remains an area that is very part of our heart as we are as Indian people, and as is the Black Hills. And the Black Hills is the heart of who we are as Indian people. So I don't have the gift of words to project that, but I've asked the Creator to help today to try to show you what this land means to us and what this park would mean to us and why we'd like to put those sculptures there. I do live in Rapid City. It's been my home for over 30 years. My parents lived here much longer than me. I'm in your ward, Ward 3. And so we will watch this very closely, and I hope you make the right vote tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now go to Kathy Robeson, also on item 67. Kathy.
I'm not usually at a council meeting this long. My name is Kathy Robeson. I am a resident of Rapid City. I'm fourth generation of Rapid City on my mother's side. And I have attended several meetings involving the First Nations Sculpture Garden and thought it was a wonderful idea. I think that addition of the artwork to our art community and to the city as a whole is a great idea. I disagree strongly with its location at Halley Park. I understand they don't feel it's a safety issue. They don't feel that it is a parking issue. But one of the things that Ms. Cook has repeatedly said is that it would be a contemplative garden. How can it be a good location for a contemplative garden between two of the busiest streets we have in Rapid City? The noise level is unbelievable no matter just about any time of the day. I also have a problem with the fact that this organization, the First Nations organization, when it was suggested to them that they look at other parks in the city, other areas in the city to be considered, they wouldn't even consider it. They wouldn't discuss it. They didn't want to look. This is what they wanted. I don't believe any organization, any ethnic group, any religious group, any group in the city should be able to put something in our city, in our location, just because they want it. And I would hope that you would vote against this MOU. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. We'll now go to Jim Peterson. Good evening, Jim.
Hi, Sam.
Hello again.
I'm speaking on behalf of South Dakota Peace and Justice. I'm president statewide. And of course, we've dealt with Indigenous issues for years and years. And even though I don't have a native South Dakota bumper sticker on my car, we have been here for a quarter of a century. And I'm really surprised that the people who do have that sticker on the car have such a lack of understanding and empathy with the history, the culture, and the sensibilities of our Native community, which makes up 9% of our population here in Rapid City, by the way. And if you knew that history, you would know that the reason Haley Park is so important is because for generations, a couple of generations, when all the Native folks lived down along Rapid Creek in teepees and small houses, that was their meeting place. When family came to town, they all met there in front of the Sioux Museum. And because of that, the place holds a special significance to them. And what I consider was a real slapdown when the Parks Board says, nope, can't do it because of the safety issues, and when that doesn't even stand up to the most basic scrutiny. And first of all, the Sioux Museum was there for decades, and it was the #1 tourist attraction in Rapid City. Granted, there wasn't as much traffic, but it was the exact same lanes as there are there now. So that's one thing. And this thing about, well, your 2-year-old child can walk out and get hit in the street. We have 7 miles of park along the busiest thoroughfares in town, Omaha and Jackson, and that could happen anywhere. I mean, that's not even a consideration. So I can see where the Native community thinks like this is the place that's important to us because of our long history there, and we have it rejected for these reasons, purported safety reasons that don't stand up to the most basic scrutiny. So I would strongly support not only approval, but approval in that location. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And I think the number is 13%. Am I right about that? Native population is 13%. Okay.
All the more reason. Closer to 18.
Okay. We'll go to Elizabeth Cook Lynn. Elizabeth?
Good evening. My name is Elizabeth Cook Lynn. I am a professor of Native Studies. I'm a member of the Crow Creek Sioux Tribe. And tonight I am asking the city to support a history art project. I speak for the First Nations Sculpture Group Corporation, newly formed. It has 12 members, and it's a board of planners made up of tribal members from all of the 9 reservations in South Dakota. For the past year, we have been trying to negotiate a memorandum of understanding. I would like to really thank so many people, and particularly James, who has helped us to get this far. The purpose of this, of course, is to put 4 busts. By the way, how do you get this thing up there? Oh, there it is. Magic. The thing is, we are trying to honor our past, and I just want to say 2 things. Maybe 3. As an old professor, I'm probably going to say more than that. No, I'm not. But anyway, this project is not meant to be obtrusive. It's an art history project. It has nothing to do with politics. It has nothing to do with religion. We don't want to dig up old animosities. Very simply, it's an educational, contemplative garden, and it will remind us of our indigenous past. And as you know, all public art is controversial, especially if it is embedded in a transformative history. And that's really what we want to stress. We need to transform the history of war into a history of peace, and we need to transform what we think about this area of the Black Hills. I really hope that we can look forward for a decent relationship for Indians and the newcomers to this place. I want to say that there are 1,600 acres of land that are parkland here, and not one of them mentions our history, our concomitant history. We signed a treaty in 1868, and there's not one mention of it in the entire park system. So I guess that's about all I have got to say, and I thank everybody for their generosity.
Thank you, Professor. And now we'll go to Rich Drager, also on item 67.
I first got to Rapid City 35 years ago, and I expected to see more American Indians on the streets and in the stores. It was like they were the invisible people. They seemed to be relegated to another part of the town, but that I never went to. I got into the Indian White Relations Council at the time, and I had to find out why. And I found that there was quite a bit of racism in the community. It was sort of shocking to me since I was from Sioux Falls and I had not experienced this before. Rapid City has come a long way in the last few years, and it's integrated the Indian population into the businesses and into the community. I saw a substantial number of Indian workers at the Walmart store out here on the south side the other night, and they were all fine young people. I think it's time for Rapid City to show gratitude and appreciation to the American Indian for the sacrifices that they've made in losing their land. It is very important for them to have a highly visible reminder of our debt. It is time to honor those American Indians who have distinguished themselves in many endeavors, to inspire others to keep trying. And I don't think it's a good idea to relegate this project to a park nobody knows the location of, that needs a sign after many years of existence to be told where it is, like the Journey Museum recently. And I think that this location will not be a tourist attraction. It will be very visible to those who pass through on one of the busiest streets in South Dakota. And it'll serve as a reminder of the worth and dignity of every person. It'll be testimony that Rapid City recognizes the contribution of the American Indian in the community and proudly proclaim that American Indians are not going to be invisible anymore in this community. Thank you.
Thank you, Rich. We'll now go to Carol Merwin. Carol.
Carol Merwin, Ward 5, and this is for Democracy in Action, Women Working for a Better World. Rapid City Common Council submitted by Democracy in Action on August 5th, 2013. The authors are Lynn Barber, Dorothy Brewick, Angela Giffen, and Karen Miller. A resolution in support of the Native American Sculpture Garden, whereas the First Nation Sculpture Garden Corporation has proposed a sculpture garden featuring Native American heroic scholars in Halley Park, Rapid City, South Dakota. Whereas Halley Park is a location of historical significance to the Native people of this area. Whereas the public art in Rapid City increases the quality of life, cultural awareness, and richness of this great city. Whereas Rapid City municipal authorities have the ability to address concerns for relevant safety issues, and whereas Rapid City has an opportunity to be a leader in recognizing Native heroes in the United States. Therefore, we, Democracy in Action, support the First Nations Sculpture Garden Corporation, and urge the Rapid City Common Council to approve their project in a timely manner. I don't know why I get this too. And then does my personal one come now too?
Go ahead.
Okay. On the way here, and I thought the meeting started at 5:30, and I thought it was just perfect because I could really look at the traffic going by there at the time most people come off work. So I very conveniently could park on the street. I walked 3 blocks up to the light, crossed with a little white guy, and went into Halley Park, walked all the way down, saw one man walking across the street where there is no crossing. He did just fine, and so did I. And so I do not see any safety issue here.
Thank you, Carol. We'll now go to James Swan. James? Good evening.
Mayor, City Council, my name is James Swan. I'm with the United Urban Warrior Society. I founded that 4 years ago. I just wanted to say a couple things. That park down there, everybody asks, well, why do they want it there? Well, because that's where we wanted it to be. We picked that place a long time ago, and that's where we would really like to see it built. The last couple of weeks after before the last meeting and through this meeting, I went online and tried to strum up a lot of support from other natives in Rapid City to come and support this issue. And looking around, there's not a lot of them here, so I went back to some of them and I asked them, well, where were you guys at? And you know, their common response was, well, we already know what the answer is going to be. It's always been that same way. So with that being said, I just like to, I think it would be an awesome part for Rapid City, so that the native people in Rapid City can see that things are changed in Rapid City, and maybe it's time that we are accepted as being members of this community. Thanks.
Thank you, James. And I have 5 speaker request forms left, and we'll first go to Chuck Tennant, also on item 67.
Thank you, Mayor, Council. My name is Chuck Tennant. I am a member of the Rapid City Parks and Recreation Advisory Board. We as a board voted 4-3 against the Halley Park location after about 5 or 6 hours of work on this very issue. I want to begin my talk with the fact that I am in complete agreement with the project. The 4 individuals proposed for the initial statues are exemplary, but I think that all future people that are proposed need to come before the Parks and Recreation Board and before the council for approval. I'm in total disagreement with the proposed location at Halley Park, and I will propose an alternative site and reasons for the alternative site. The initiators of the First Nations project want to put a contemplative garden in Halley Park. The definition of contemplative is to mediate or to be able to mediate. If the proponents of the building of this memorial wanted for a contemplative meditating party, sorry, I'm not used to talking big words, why do they wish to place it in the triangle of the 3 busiest streets in Rapid City? Do you realize that the combined count, according to the latest published traffic counts, reports that more than 52,000 vehicles per day pass this area? This becomes a safety issue to me. Have any of you ever sat in Halley Park and listened to the noise of all this traffic? It is loud at all times. And it is proposed to be a meditative park. I'm confused by this. In my circle, contemplative and meditation involve quiet areas. This certainly will not be a quiet area for any meditation or anything other than trying to drown out the traffic noise to collect one's thoughts. The initiators of the project say that people will not be drawn to it. So the dangers of creating it in Halley Park would not be a problem. If this is so, why build it in the first place if people are not going to come to see it? What is the purpose of building statues and monuments to individuals that people do not want to see? Why desecrate the beautiful park that we now have if people are not going to watch it? I instead propose an alternative solution. I believe the concept of this proposal is great. I believe that instead of this memorial should be located at the Journey Museum, and there is parking there. I think that in addition to this great statue park, we could revive the powwow grounds idea that was initiated years ago. As a child, I remember going down to the Duhamel trading post and watching. I would also propose that Indian artisans could be brought into that area with little tent-like things like we have at Farmers Market, and they could sell their artisans there. I believe that
Chuck, if you could wrap up your comments.
I skipped. So I am ahead, thank you. I believe that the proposed location for the project at Halley Park is a safety issue. It is a very serious safety issue, and the only issue that should be considered. The project design is beautiful and honors some great Americans. I'm in full support of the project if it is located in a safer place in Rapid City, and I thank you.
Thank you, Chuck. We'll now go to Karen Gunderson Olson. Good evening.
Good evening. My name is Karen Gunderson Olson, and I thank you very much, Mayor and council members, for listening to this conversation, which is very important in my view. Tonight, I want to remind you that in 1993, the City Council of Rapid City approved a cultural plan for the City of Rapid City, which was revised in 1997 and was again approved. This document is called Many Voices, the Rapid City Cultural Plan. And I would just remind you that in the years that have passed since this has happened, many of the projects that are a part of this cultural plan have been implemented. But I also want to remind you of some important language that is a part of this document that I think serves our community in a very important way. Under goal number 4, respect for cultural diversity, and I'll just read from the plan. Rapid City citizens and cultures will enjoy increased understanding, respect, and appreciation. Rapid City is home to people of many races and national origins, a diversity that enriches the community. And then I go on to the 1997 revisions of this document under goal number 4, again, respect for cultural diversity. Rapid City citizens and cultures will enjoy increased understanding, respect, and appreciation. The American Indian presence is a majority minority is noted. And we note that their art and culture are evident in galleries, shops, and museums, and in design features in historic architecture. However, a need exists for youth of color to have more opportunity to learn about their own cultural heritage and for exposure to many cultural heritages for all students. And then I'll read from this section of the plan. The plan urges city offices, including the planning department, which now has a different name, and the community development and business leaders should exercise leadership to encourage positive symbols and images of American Indians and other cultures in art and design in public places and in public and private signage. And Strategy 4.5A urges the Mayor's Committee on Diverse Cultures to begin a dialogue within the community on positive symbols and images of American Indians and other cultures in art and design in public places and in public and private signage in art in public places, public and private signs and designs. And I mention that because we all agreed at some point in the past, and the council approved this plan, and we've been moving forward. So that I think this is an important step for our community. In addition, I think that this is a good location. In viewing the veterans' memorials that are in various sites and the one that is within this site, it's rare when there are large groups of people there. But on an annual basis and at various special times, there is a place for them to gather. And I think this too will honor and be a good gathering place. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Karen. And we'll now go to Marv Kammerer. Good evening, Marv.
Good evening. Good evening to all of you. It's not an easy thing to go back and try to realize how long this culture, the Native American culture, has tried to get some sort of recognition in this town. This city has drawn a lot of money off of the reservations, the poorest piece of country in the United States. You have your powwows that bring people from reservations all over North Dakota, South Dakota, back into Nebraska. Every year. You have the big tournaments here just before Christmas. They come from hundreds of miles to watch their youth. They come to shop for Christmas. They spend money for food in the motels. And they have asked before, let's let this group take the leadership. Let's support them. That school back off across the creek here may have several students who may make that journey over there. And it clicks something in here. I can do that. The reservations are begging for people who understand that culture to get that kind of training and be able to give it back. And it's our place as people of power to support that. Anything that you can change a young person from a hopeless situation to a positive one is good for this city, it's good for the culture, and it's good for me. I'm getting to be kind of an old guy. My family's been around here maybe for some consider maybe too long. But I watch, and I have enjoyed the participation and the presence of Native American people in the hundreds on our ranch, their land by treaty. So I believe in the Constitution. At your hearing the other day, I came in here a little short of time, and city vehicles were parked all over where we are supposed to park to participate. So I hid over across there, parked there, and I got this nice little token from the finance department over here. Sauce for the goose is sauce for the gander. But if this council wants to be remembered as the year that we allowed progress for the Native American, not sports, not powwows, cultural events that set out there, people, statues, people that young can emulate. We need that. You need that. And I need that. Thank you.
Thank you, Marv. If you would give your parking ticket to Charlene over here, and I'll take care of it. I'll take care of it for you. Well, I'll go to the last of the speaker request forms, and if I missed anyone, if you could please fill out a speaker request form while the last speaker is speaking, and we'll go to Dr. Rebecca Lees on item 67.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. My name is Rebecca Lees, and I've lived here almost 4 years now. And I will make my comments through the eyes of my profession. I taught secondary and university students for 36 years. This is a complex issue, but to me, it seems that it's an issue of inclusion, voice, and respect. Inclusion, voice, and respect. I'm a newspaper hound. I read the Rapid City Journal every day, and I read the USA Today, and I look at the New York Times, and I try to get to the Wall Street Journal a couple times each week. And I'm also a subscriber to both Native papers, the Lakota Country Times and the Native Sun. And it really hit me when I was thinking about this: inclusion, voice, and respect. Because I see almost nothing in our non-Native media that gives inclusion, voice, and respect. What I see usually are problems. So-and-so was drunk and ran away from the police, or, this sort of thing. If you look at the papers, the Native papers, you would be astounded if non-Native people would look at these papers at the incredible accomplishments, the good things that are going on in all walks of life, not just sports, not just art, not just music, but civic accomplishments. One paper here, the Native Sun, in the front, featured Dr. Donald Warren, who is an Oglala Lakota, who is being considered to be U.S. Surgeon General. Now, I'm a health professional, and that is the ultimate position in our country, to be Surgeon General. I was so impressed when I read that. And I never saw that in the Rapid City Journal. I believe the controversy here, and this is just my opinion, but I believe this controversy is because this project really represents a paradigm change for all of us. Elizabeth mentioned a transformative time, and I think it is. Usually, because of the nature of our region here, we're focused on tourism and profit and those kinds of things, and a lot of that has been made off our Native American folk. We also are accustomed to memorializing those who have had their lives cut short due to unfortunate circumstances, and we see memorials in parks and such. This project seeks to honor and memorialize 4 Lakota people, scholars and artists, based on their accomplishments, not their loss of life. And this is a critical point. In the discipline of education, we know that developing an internally driven regulation of one's behavior, an internally driven motivation, is what enables people to thrive best and be healthiest. Internally driven. Now, what provides that internal drive? Of course, as you might guess, this would be a myriad of things, but one that is in all the textbooks, is the acknowledged key factor of an individual having heroes and mentors, whether they be live or studied. I know they affected me. My dad only went to 8th grade. I grew up in a farm family, Mennonite. I had mentors and heroes and people that looked out for me, and it made all the difference. Inspiration creates dreams. Dreams create accomplishment, and one should never underestimate the power of role models, heroes, dreams, and hopes. This is a remarkable opportunity for Rapid City to be on the cutting edge of a positive project that shows goodwill, and as was mentioned, to date, there isn't any other, in any of our park lands, anything that the Native Americans are honored with. And I urge you to respect their wishes. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lees. We do not have any additional speaker request forms for items through 74. Did I miss anyone? Did I miss anyone? Okay. Public comment is now closed. What we will do is we'll go through the 3 ordinances, and then we will take a short recess. Item 51. Go to our Legal and Finance Vice Chair, Bonnie Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. This is second reading, ordinance number 5950, an ordinance amending provisions permitting bingo games and lotteries by amending Chapter 5.20 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and I move for approval.
Motion by Peterson, second by Laurenti. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 52.
Second reading, ordinance number 5951, an ordinance to change the process for small purchases and execution of contracts by department directors by amending sections 3.04.030 and 3.04.090 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and I move for approval.
Motion by Peterson and a second by John Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none. All in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. We will now move on to a most foul topic, item 53.
Okay, is this the first reading, ordinance number, I wrote through it, 5953, maybe?
Yes.
An ordinance to prohibit the keeping of pigeons and repeal the pigeon loft permit by amending section 6.08.060 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, and I will refer it to the floor.
Okay. Make a motion to delay. Okay, we have a motion to, can I interpret that to take that back to committee, or you want it to come back to council?
Go back to committee.
Okay, we have a motion to take back to Legal and Finance. Do we have a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Okay, and we have a second by Charity Doyle, and Charity will now go to you.
Mayor, I just wanted to ask you a question. Since you brought that forward, are you okay with that delay now that there's been some new information, or?
Sure. It hasn't been an issue in 30 years, and
okay.
It won't be an issue for another 2 weeks, I don't think.
Thank you.
It's fine. Any further discussion? We'll go to, let's go to Bill Clayton, and then we'll come back.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to make a substitute motion that we just do away with this amendment. If it was brought forward based on the fact that the understanding of the city was that we had nobody in the city who was keeping pigeons, and we find out from Mr. Mooney that certainly there is, and now he's caught in a dilemma. He has learned that he was inadvertently breaking the law because he didn't have a permit, seeks to gain a permit. Nobody knows how to give him a permit, and then he's stymied because we're going to do away with the permit process. But this goes further, and it says an ordinance to prohibit the keeping of pigeons. So now, Mr. Mooney, not only will we not give you a permit, perhaps, but we'll tell you that you're breaking the law until you get rid of your pigeons. If the whole purpose was because nobody had pigeons and somebody does, and I think there needs to be. Mr. Mooney, could I ask you a question, please, sir? Do you know of anybody else in the city keeping pigeons? And I'm not asking you to narc anybody. I just.
No, sir. There are quite a few on the outskirts of town.
Okay.
They may be annexed in the future, they're concerned.
Fair enough. And, we've entertained discussions about chickens, and we found out there are people keeping chickens in town. So here we've learned something. You know, we've already got an ordinance on the books that allows it. It costs us nothing, it would seem, to keep the ordinance on the book. It's already established. Why not just do away with what we thought we were going to try to do here, and allow Mr. Mooney to proceed and get the permit he needs, and be one of. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. We'll go to our city attorney, Joel Landine.
Thank you, Mayor. I would make an alternative suggestion. Because nobody seemed to realize that there was a permit requirement, and as you pointed out, it doesn't appear to have been a problem, perhaps the answer is just to remove the permit requirement. I mean, maybe ask ourselves, is this something that we even need to regulate or permit? And if it is, then we keep that portion of the ordinance that repeals the requirement that it be permitted, and remove the portion that then prohibits pigeons, so that you have essentially just the deregulation of the pigeon coops at this point.
Okay. Okay. Richie, will you articulate your substitute motion and then go ahead and make it?
Please understand, I'm not going to be able to repeat or parrot back what the city attorney's office
That was good.
mentioned.
Very
So,
good. I'm impressed, Richie.
I will try to see if I've got this close, and Joel, please chime in, that we remove the permitting portion of this ordinance. Am I right, Joel? Just removing the
Well, that would be
permitting?
the part of the amended ordinance that you would leave in, and then we would take out the prohibition. And maybe that, what I would suggest is maybe you do take it back to Legal and Finance Committee. I will ask Ryan to make the changes to the ordinance that are consistent with that, and then we will bring it forward for a new first reading, because as Alderman Clayton pointed out, the title of it is to prohibit, and we wouldn't be doing that anymore. So we would be substantially changing the title of the ordinance in order to carry that out.
I'll withdraw my motion. Essentially, Mr. Mooney, I don't want your money. I don't want it. So that's where I'm coming in at. And if that's what the city attorney is recommending, that we send it back into Legal and Finance, make sure we got the language correct, let's do that.
Okay, we currently have a motion on the floor to take this back to Legal and Finance, and that's the original motion. We do not have a substitute motion. So, and that could be handled at Legal and Finance as well. And I think our city attorney, based on the discussion, probably has enough information to be able to bring forward a simple change. I just want everybody to know that there was not a lot of staff time put into the discussion of drafting this pigeon ordinance. So, anyway, which Legal and Finance meeting would this be coming to?
August 14th.
August 14th? Okay. We'll now go to Jerry Wright. Good with that?
In the interest of pigeon rights, call the question.
Okay, the questions has been called, and Jerry Wright also mentioned that if anybody has any further feedback on this, they can email, call, or tweet us. It was his, he said it. All right, any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We are now going to take a 10-minute recess. We'll be back at 9:30.
Want to go through the two ordinances or two others? Doors.
Right.
Here.
Yours will exchange.
They're cranked up, it'll be winter and we'll be trying to get.
Okay. We are now out of recess. Item number 54. Bonnie, item 54.
Thank you, Mayor. First reading ordinance 5947, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Spurlick Consulting, Inc. for Walgar Development Corporation for rezoning from low-density residential District 1 to medium-density residential district for property generally described as being located at the current southern terminus of Winfield Street, approved in conjunction with a planned development designation.
We have a motion by Peterson and a second by Laurenti. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. 55.
First reading ordinance 5949, an ordinance amending section 17.06 of chapter 17 of the Rapid City Municipal Code, rezoning the within described property as requested by Ferber Engineering Company for Kevin L. Randall for rezoning from general commercial district to light industrial district for property generally described as being located at 2090 Deadwood Avenue, approved in conjunction with the associated comprehensive plan amendment.
Second.
Motion by Bonnie Peterson and a second by Jerry Wright. And there were some questions that came up on what the purpose of this was, and the answer is that car repairs require an industrial zoning. So Brett, could you briefly address that?
Yeah, general commercial, there's a specific provision prohibiting automobile repair, and in light industrial there is not. And so since they are doing car sales, we also wanted to allow them to do standalone repair if they needed to. So that's the reason they're asking for the rezoning.
And we'll go to Amanda Scott. Amanda?
Thank you, Mayor. May I follow up with Brett?
You may.
Brett, so this rezoning is strictly because they're adding a separate service to repair cars there? Because I thought they were already doing repairs.
Yeah, the ordinance is really written poorly. Let me just put it that way. I think if you read through the general commercial section, there is a provision that says absolutely no vehicle repair. There also are provisions in there that say vehicle repair is allowed as an accessory use. So I think they've always followed under an accessory use. I think in order to get this fully clarified, they would prefer to be in the light industrial district so that there is no question.
So then, and you said standalone, so potentially they're looking at leasees or...
It could be. It certainly allows them more flexibility if that's what they want to do in the future.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the clarification.
Sure.
Any further discussion? The motion is to approve item 55. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Items 56 through 61. Richie, if you want to...
Thank you, Mayor. Items 56 is a request by Spurlick Consulting for Prairie Meadows Properties Incorporated for a preliminary subdivision plan for property generally described as being located west of the current terminus of Bengal Drive and Ellie Drive, and I move to approve with stipulations.
Motion by Nordstrom and a second by Peterson to approve with stipulations. We'll go to Brad Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just need to let everybody know I am the signed applicant on this, and I will be abstaining.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries with one abstention from Brad Estes.
Item 57 is a request by Dream Design International Incorporated for a preliminary subdivision for property generally described as being located south of South Dakota Highway 44 and east of Elkville Road, and I move to approve with stipulations.
Second.
Motion by Ritchie and a second by John Roberts. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 58.
A request by Dream Design International Incorporated for a preliminary subdivision plan for property generally described as being located south of Elkville Road between Concourse Drive and Jubilee Lane, and I move to approve with stipulations for the Safeway Shopping Center.
We have a motion by Nordstrom and a second by John Roberts.
John Roberts.
Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Item 59 is a request by Fisk Land Surveying and Consulting Engineering Incorporated for David and Maxine Henrik for a preliminary subdivision plan for property generally described as being located at 2281 Plateau Lane. And I move to approve with stipulations.
Motion by Nordstrom, second by Peterson to approve 59 with stipulations. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 60.
A request by Dream Design International Incorporated for a preliminary subdivision plan for property generally described as being located southeast of the intersection of Sheridan Lake Road and Dunsmore Road, north of Moon Meadows Drive, and I approve with stipulations.
Motion by Nordstrom, second by Laurenti, and we'll go to Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. May I ask a question of Brett Limbaugh, please?
Sure.
Brett, I'm just wanted to refresh my memory on this one from the Planning Commission. This one is the parcel that was originally came to the council, dividing it up into 4 parcels, and now they're looking to divide it up into 7. Is this the correct one?
Yeah, I'm looking at the plat, and I think that's exactly right.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to refresh my memory, because if I remember correctly, this has got some major roads, and they're going to have to come and work through a few things.
Correct.
Thank you.
Any further discussion on this motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 61.
A request by Dream Design International Incorporated for a preliminary subdivision for property generally described as being located east of Marlin Drive and north of East Minnesota Street, and I move to approve with stipulations.
Second.
Motion by Nordstrom, second by Roberts. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carries. We are now on item 62, and we'll go to the audience for an update on Wavy from Mary and Mallory. If you want to come forward.
Good evening. Thank you for having us. We appreciate the opportunity to give you an update on Wavy. You guys have heard a lot of topics tonight, and so why not add domestic violence and sexual assault to the table? And those are topics that people don't want to talk about either. And so I'm glad to have the opportunity to share with you the services that we're providing in the community and that there is still a strong need. In the first 6 months of 2013, Wavy has served 1,017 individuals. We've sheltered 279 women and children, an average of 69 individuals a month. We've provided over 4,000 shelter days, assisted with the help of filing 44 protection orders, answered 582 crisis calls, and we anticipate a steady increase in the numbers throughout the year. We're honored to have the partnership that we do with the city, and we look forward to that continuing in the future. And I invite any of you to come in to our facility anytime. You can give me a call or Mallory, and if you do have any questions, I'm available.
We'll go to Bonnie Peterson. Bonnie?
Thank you, Mayor. And Mary, thank you for waiting so long. You look as tired as our staff does. Has any of your funding been cut? Have you gotten notification of your state funding or any other funding sources being cut for this year or for next year?
Fortunately, our federal funding that's passed down through the state is exactly the same as it was last year, except for one source, which is the only money we get directly from the state, and that was cut $400. So we feel very fortunate that in these times where a lot of people are suffering from that even though we continue to serve more, our expenses increase, at least we aren't being cut there.
Devastated.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
And we'll go to Steve Laurenti. Steve?
Mary, if you could.
I'm sorry.
That's okay. I really don't have a question, but I just wanted to say that I hope you're sincerely wrong about the increase that you're going to have in this next few months or the next part of the year. I hope that you're wrong about that, but I just wanted to express my thanks to you and all of your staff for what service you provide for our community. It's invaluable. It's nothing we could even come close to delivering to this community at the cost that you're able to do it, so we really appreciate your service. Thank you.
Thank you. We couldn't do it without community support.
Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. And Mary, I thought Alderman Laurenti was going to address it, and I know it's not a topic anybody wants to talk about, but since you are predicting the numbers to go up, do you know or do you have reasons why you believe the numbers are going to go up? Is it due to the economic conditions? Is it due to what kind of stressors are you seeing that is allowing you to say that you're anticipating higher numbers?
Well, one thing about domestic violence and sexual assault, as you know, is it's not a topic people want to talk about. It's not things people want to come forward and share. So the fact that we're here, we're in the community, we've been here for 30 years, we continue to provide services, we continue to build partnerships with law enforcement, state's attorney's office, the hospital. People are more aware of our services. They know that we have cohesive services in the community now, and that probably gives a little bit more sense of that it's okay to come forward and talk, because there are cohesive services available and streamlined.
So basically, your forecast of increasing numbers is not necessarily due to an increase due to the stressors, but it's just the awareness that you now have this program available, and you're anticipating being more of a receptacle of other organizations that are going to utilize your services?
Yeah, that's one thought. It's hard to know for sure, because they are the most underreported crimes, so it's really hard to predict why they're increasing when they aren't being reported.
Well, the main reason I ask is because basically Alderwoman Peterson started the conversation, and that is, if you're anticipating higher numbers, what does your budget support, or what will your budget support? And since we're in budgetary,
sure,
we just wanted to know if you were anticipating why.
We continue to seek out funding sources, new funding sources, and our fundraisers have increased, and that's in participation, so that means the community is becoming more aware of our services too, and are out there supporting us. So not only the numbers of people that are showing up at our fundraisers, but the increase in some revenue there too.
Thank you, Mary. And I'm just making this a statement for the public, but I'm going to put in the form of a question to you. But I know that you're also, while other organizations are becoming aware of your services, you're also building that connectivity with the other services so that you can become more of a one-stop servicing agent when these victims do come forward.
Absolutely. We don't want to duplicate services. We want to work with others in the community.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bonnie Peterson.
I'd like to move to acknowledge the report.
We have a motion by Peterson and a second by Doyle to acknowledge the report.
And can I keep the floor just a second longer?
Okay.
I want to thank you, Mayor Quaker, for bringing forward an increase in the budget for this important group.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Mary, for all you do.
Thank you.
We're now on item number 63. Bonnie.
It's me, okay. Authorize reimbursement in the amount of $718.49 to Frederick Reed as reimbursement for property damage caused by sewer backup at 3912 Maple Avenue, and I'll move for approval.
We have a motion by Peterson and a second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say that as of today, Mr. Reed has signed the release for this amount, so I know there were a couple of people trying to take the conversation a different direction. Is no longer necessary at this point. Thank you.
Very good. And this, for everyone's benefit, this is the amount that's allowable by city policy. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 64. Bonnie.
Request the mayor to authorize staff to bring forward an ordinance amendment to establish a procedure to allow special permits to be granted on private property for uses that are not otherwise identified in the Rapid City Municipal Code. I'll refer this to the floor. Thank you.
By Laurenti and a second by Roberts for approval to proceed with drafting an ordinance amendment. Any further discussion? There isn't a time frame on this. Joel, give us an idea how much time you think you'd need. Probably fall more in planning department than you, but.
Well, and it'll be probably a joint effort between my office and the planning department. I'm trying to remember what the discussion at the committee was as far as
October 30?
Okay, yeah. I think that would be a good idea, and then like we discussed, we could at least report back if we weren't, if it ends up being in the plan, there might be something that needs to go to the planning commission, but at least we can report back and stay on the radar screen if we do that.
Very good. October 30, Legal and Finance is when it would come back. So it could either go to Planning Commission before or after that time, whichever works best for staff. Any further discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Item number 65, Richie.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 65 is discussion on uranium mining, and I'll defer to the floor.
We have a motion by Laurenti and a second by Roberts to acknowledge, and we'll go to Jerry Wright.
I'd like to ask the City Council to pass a resolution opposing the in situ mining of uranium by PowerTech in South Dakota, as the risk to our precious water is not acceptable.
Second.
Okay. We have a motion by Wright and a second by Doyle to repeat it one more time.
The resolution would read that we're opposing the in situ mining of uranium by PowerTech in South Dakota, as the risk to our precious water is not acceptable.
Okay. And we'll go to Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. This is a topic that has been on our radars for a little while, and while the city of Rapid City doesn't necessarily have jurisdiction over what the city of Edgemont is going to decide or what the state's going to decide on this issue, I believe hearings start in September. I do think that being one of the biggest, well, I think, what is it? It's 72% of the state's tourism tax dollars are generated in the Black Hills. So not just western South Dakota, but specifically the Black Hills, 72%. And then a large part of that is coming through Rapid City. So I do think that we have a fair amount of weight and interest in the issue. I was starting to look at half-lives of some of these different byproducts of this process. Does anyone not know what a half-life is? What it is it's the amount of time for one of these elements to degrade, half of it to degrade. So for arsenic, which is one of the byproducts, 80 days. That doesn't sound like maybe such a big deal. Radium, 1,601 years for half of it. And then the next 1,601 years, half of the remaining, and so on and so forth. Uranium, depends on which one you're looking at, but a range of 704 million to 4.5 billion years. Selenium, 327,000 years. These are the byproducts of it. Now, the science is very interesting, and coming from that background, I'm a water resources engineer, looking at that, what I see a lot of is that the experts are saying, well, we just reversed the process that the uranium was deposited in the first place. Well, I figured that's playing God, and if God wanted it to be going in the process to be going in the other direction, he would have accounted for that. Some of the things to consider throughout this, not only locally, but big picture-wise, the state of South Dakota, assuming the project is approved, I don't feel should be allowing for the free use of our water. I don't agree they should do it anyway, but if they're going to do it, should they allow for the free use of our water? Should there be a charge for uranium processed and sold that adds to the wealth of South Dakota? Right now, as it stands, all of that wealth is going to be going outside of our state. And I know that we have segments of our region that are really trying to expand the diversity of industry within our region, economic development. We all hear that buzzword. But do we do it at any cost? I mean, I think it's a fair question. And then perspective just for Rapid City, based on one of the stats I gave you earlier, the property taxes we pay just in Rapid City cover our police department, and that's about it. So we rely heavily on sales tax to pick up the slack for all the other expectations that you as taxpayers have from the city. more than 2/3 of those dollars, those sales tax dollars, come from outside of the area. So what did they say earlier? Our biggest industries in the region are agriculture and tourism. What's the one thing that could kill both of those in no time flat? You contaminate the water. We already have a mountain pine beetle epidemic that is starting to challenge our tourism industry. I've heard many people this summer so far just say how sad and ugly things are getting out there. They want to come to a beautiful place, and while some of us are still always going to see it as beautiful, those people that don't have that history here may look at it and see the decimation of our forests as a negative draw and may tell people that are going to start not coming to our region. But we're far from self-sufficient is the point. And we need to think about the impact on our lifeblood, not just locally, but our entire state. I mean, 72%, that's huge, that's huge. And we're already, like I said, seeing a negative impact on our Black Hills as a result of the mountain pine beetle. And I just think that we need to stop being so desperate for any industry diversification that we would even consider this. I don't know what kind of resolution we could put together to do something like this, but I think we do need to take a stand. It's never, I've tried to find one case of it being done safely, and I can't. And some of the research I've done, they will pump it back into the ground, and they want the safety requirements waived. Well, if it's safe, why would you want the safety requirements waived? I mean, it's not rocket science. It shouldn't be anyway, but it's slick, I will say that. So, if I'm interested, and I think I will be attending these hearings. I mean, if it's going to be allowed, charge for the water. Take the byproducts, store them somewhere for a while, and test them before discharging them into the ground. It shouldn't be as difficult as it's being. Very curious. I think the more people that get involved, I think it starts September 23rd, the better. Educate yourselves. This is a big deal. And whatever we can do, again, Rapid City has a big pull, a big draw, a lot of intelligent people. I think it's time that we use that intelligence and play it out. You might arrive to a different conclusion than I have, but do the homework, please, and let us know what you're finding out. Thank you.
Thank you, Charity. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll go in a slightly different direction. I'm going to support the motion that's on the floor just wholeheartedly, and also include that the letter that you were talking about earlier in agenda review, that be accompanied with that resolution proving that South Dakota waters will be safe from the DNR. I support that also. I was having a conversation this last weekend with a beekeeper, and he and I were having a conversation about the little frog that it turns up in the drainage areas that we have in the different areas of the Black Hills. And he wasn't really supportive of the idea of protecting endangered species such as this particular frog that we were discussing. I won't bore you the name of that frog because primarily I can't remember the whole name of it, but essentially this beekeeper wasn't getting the idea how these two related, that the frog, what happens to the frog is probably what's happening to his bees as well. And this last year, he was losing about 50% of his bees because they didn't understand why they were losing that much of a bee population. So I believe very strongly that there is a correlation. When Mother Nature is trying to give us a signal, give us a heads up, the red flags are out there. So maybe Edgemont's the frog and we're the bee. So heads up. Thank you.
Thank you, Richie. We'll go to Brad Estes. Brad?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What the heck? I thought you were talking first. Anyway, I, having come from Wall, served on the city council in Wall for 4 years, and in an economy that was driven and fueled on free ice water, and sitting next to Bill Husted for all 4 of those years, I'm fully in favor of protecting our this water and fully in favor of this letter. Thank you.
Bonnie.
Thank you, Mayor. I don't think any of us can truly predict the outcome if they were to proceed. However, when we look around the country, we see contaminated place after place after place. We know that many countries have banned it. Countries smarter than our own. And this is a foreign company that's coming in, and we're risking depleting our natural resources for uranium that will go to yet another country. It's not going to be used in our own country, so there's no patriotism involved with that. As a nurse, I can tell you that we're made up of 3/4 water. Water is extremely, extremely important. And you may hear me time to time on the council talk about that we're protecting the city, not just for now, but 100 years, 200 years, 1,000 years, that we have to think big. And if they are given the rights, they'll be given free water rights that they will then be free to sell to another company, another country, or whatever. So it would trump any claim that Rapid City would have. And we know that we have droughts, and so I envision a time that we might need to go, bring in water from some other place or come up with some plan to increase water for our own citizens. And I think the truth of the matter is that they're going to be removing enormous amounts of water, I think equivalent to more than like what our city uses every day. That's how much water they can suck out and can potentially contaminate. So I would say because of the water safety issues, and as Alderwoman Doyle said, because of tourism, who wants to go through a radioactive site? And what is that radioactivity going to do with 1,000 years of wind blowing on it and the rains? And to say that the contamination could not seep down into our aquifers is very naive, because eventually it will do so. I'm not an expert on this at all, but I can tell you as a nurse that the number one thing that we need to survive is water. You can go a long time without food, but you can't go very long without water. And so I will be wholeheartedly in support of this. Thank you.
If there are no other council lights, I would like to take a moment to speak. I have experienced several of these resolutions over the years where a council will ask another governing body to take a certain position. And I found that those types of resolutions are far more effective if they're unanimous. If there's even one or two people that vote against the resolution, and I think an example of that would be the billboard billboard legislation. There was a resolution on to affirm the city's position in the state legislature, and what was seized on was the fact that that didn't have unanimous support. People have their own reasons for voting the way that they do, but my suggestion is that as this moves through the process, because we're not passing the resolution tonight, it's merely direction to draft the resolution and bring it back to Public Works. If there isn't unanimous support for this, I would encourage the council to consider changing this to be a resolution of concern, and ask for information as to why the notification requirements were curtailed, because nobody has an answer to that other than to move the process along, and that's not good enough for me anyway. And I remember when I did my graduate internship at the police department in Sioux City, Iowa, and one of the detectives said, "Sam, if there's nothing in the trunk, why would you drive away at 100 miles an hour?" And the question I have in this case is why on earth would we be facing a situation in western South Dakota where the environmental regulations would be curtailed to move this process along, and we're not even notified in a timely manner if there's a problem, and that is a real concern to me. Council President Jerry Wright has sent his own letter. I have sent my own letter. on city letterhead, and it's linked to tonight's agenda, and it asks DENR for information to assure the safety of our water supply, and we can use that as the basis for drafting the resolution. But again, if I would encourage a unanimous vote in at least supporting the drafting of this resolution. But if you have a concern about this, speak up, because I think a resolution of concern that's unanimous will also be effective, because I don't think many of these concerns can really be answered. And I do want to take a moment to thank the Governor's Office and DENR. I know the Governor's Office doesn't have direct say over this, but they do have some influence. I do want to thank the Governor's Office and DENR for being willing to hold their hearing in Rapid City. That's unusual for them. Usually the hearings are held in Pierre, and so it's very meaningful that the hearing will be held out here. So those are my comments. I support drafting the resolution, but again, if there's, I do think that a resolution of concern would also be impactful if that's what it takes to get a unanimous vote. And now we'll go to Jerry Wright.
Well, I like my nice, simple resolution because they're going to understand it. And I think that's the way it ought to stay. And that we oppose the in-situ mining of the uranium by PowerTech in South Dakota, period, as the risk to our precious water is not acceptable. Keep it simple, they'll understand it. I don't want to add it up anymore.
Charity.
Just to add one thing to that, they can ensure that it's safe on paper and with words, but when you look at the history and then the cases out there, the evidence and the practice is not backing up those words, so I still.
Okay, very good. Everyone understands the motion. The motion will be to draft a resolution and take to the next Public Works meeting, which will be next week, Tuesday. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Note for the record, it was unanimous.
Unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Item number 66, and the recommendation for this item was to be continued to August 13.
Mayor? Yeah, okay.
Okay. Rich, you want to read this in the record for us and then go ahead and offer that motion.
Thank you, Mayor. Item 66 is to request from Dream Design International for a variance to waive the requirement to install a sidewalk along proposed Lytle Lane per city ordinance. I would move to continue this item to the August 13th Public Works Committee meeting.
We have a motion by Nordstrom and a second by Peterson. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Opposed, motion carries. 67, Ritchie.
Thank you. Authorize the mayor and finance officer to sign the second revision of the memorandum of agreement between the City of Rapid City and First Nations Sculpture Garden Incorporated for the Sculpture Garden in Halley Park, and I move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion by Nordstrom and a second by Wright. And we'll go to Jerry Wright.
I've said all I need to say.
Okay.
Thank you.
Bill Clayton.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't mind saying that I came into this event, this situation with the sculptures, thinking a little bit negatively about the location, and got a real education at the Public Works Committee meeting, and then again tonight. You know, when we listen to the people speak, both for and against, I think it's an easy decision to make. It's the right thing to do. It's the right place for all the right reasons, and I am in total support of this. Thank you.
Steve Laurenti.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I just wanted to, and I hope my fellow alderman, John Roberts, doesn't mind my saying, but we spoke about this a little earlier today, and we both were of the same thinking that this is a long time coming, and I think it's going to be a very positive. I, too, initially had concerns about the location, but I just wanted to read a little bit from the memorandum of agreement so that everybody understands those for and against it. Part of this agreement says First Nations agrees that it will address accessibility and parking substantially prior to construction of the other sculpture garden elements. First Nations agrees that if the city deems the proposed accessibility and parking solutions developed by First Nations insufficient at the Halley Park location. It will suggest alternate locations for the sculpture garden. So this agreement wasn't something where they said, we want this and we don't care what happens. I mean, they want to do what's right for the city, and we want to do what's right and respect this sculpture. And I think it's a great thing, and it's a long time coming, and I support it 100%. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We'll now go to Charity Doyle.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Growing up in Rapid, that site has always been the Sioux Indian Museum to me. Always. Still call it that. And when, you know, someone's asking, I'll say, oh, you got to go to the Sioux Indian, oh, wait, what is it now? Oh, it's Parks and Rec. You know, it's constantly changing, but for those of us that are from here, that's what it is, and that's what the significance of that land. I don't often see many people there, and I think that if this sculpture garden draws a lot of people, to me that's going to be a good problem to have, and let me explain why. I come from a multiracial family, Black, Hispanic, Native, and white. And the Indian arms of my family decided early on when I was a child that they were going to leave Rapid City because of the stigma and the challenges of growing up here in Rapid City. And so they left, relocated to California, where some of those issues wouldn't be predominant. They've all been very successful. But I think if this garden accomplishes the purpose for which it's being created, it can change that conversation. Families may not be split up. And to see that in my lifetime, I think would just be a tremendous gift. So I applaud the efforts, 100% support. As an engineer, I will say I systematically went through the concerns, the safety concerns. They haven't existed thus far with anything else that have been put there. Again, if it does draw those issues post-construction, then it's a good problem to have, and we can have a new conversation. But I say we go for it. Thank you.
Thank you, Charity. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. I just wanted to address a couple of other items here that the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board made some comments to us at the Public Works Committee meeting, and I wanted to stress to the Parks and Rec Board that it's an advisory group, so we listen to your suggestions and comments and concerns, and I believe we've addressed them within this MOA. So that doesn't mean we want to fire the, bless you, we don't want to fire the group as an advisory committee, and that's not, I've seen some conversations about that. And so to the Parks and Advisory Board, please keep your recommendations coming to us, because if we disagree on one item, doesn't mean we're going to disagree with all of your items. You have got some great suggestions. Keep them coming. The other things that were, one of the major things that I had to look up the definition of contemplation, what that meant. And so I just totally understand what the concept for this area was. And people were suggesting that because it meant a very quiet area. That's not what I was reading into the definition. For me, the contemplation area is a thoughtful observation, and it's full or deep consideration is what Webster has to say. So for me, that satisfies the issue of noise. I don't think we're going to have that here. And also that the international visitors, people are very interested in coming to this site, which means there's going to be a few people coming here and want to see this. We also get them at the Journey Museum, and they're very, very receptive to the Native American culture. They like to get more information about the Native American culture and our indigenous peoples. So thank you for doing what you've done. And then the other part is the location. Mr. Leach, I believe you addressed them quite well, and I believe we've addressed them within the MOA very well. And some of the considerations that you've brought up, I applaud you for bringing those suggestions forward, and I believe we have a resolution to all those concerns. Thank you, Mayor. I'll yield the floor.
Thank you, Richie. Bonnie Peterson.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to thank the people that served on the Parks and Rec Advisory Board, and also the mayor for help shepherding this through the process. And then also Elizabeth Cook-Lynn and her board for coming forward and being obstinate. I have said from the beginning that this is not a good location. I think we all kind of felt that at first, but it's not for us to decide. So I'm certainly going to support it. Because I think it's best, bottom line is I think it's best for all of the people of Rapid City for us to move forward and to what we can be and not what we have been. So it's kind of that 100, 200, 500-year look that we're taking it's a small step, but in a lot of ways it's a giant step toward more inclusiveness, more acceptance, more learning from each other. And I think that's extremely important. So thank you.
Thank you, Bonnie. We'll now go to John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And Elizabeth, I think I would call you tenacious. And I was very, very happy, lucky, and pleased to be able to sit in on this from the very beginning. I thought it was a wonderful idea. I thought that some of the comments and issues through the Park and Rec were a little bit iffy at best. I think that seeing that park evolve through the years, I grew up real close to that park, and I can remember before the flood in 1972 when there was still a lot of natives that lived in that area and lived to the north of there, and it was a meeting place. There was always people in that park. There was people that would come down and you know, meet their friends, meet their family, you know, it was a meeting place. And I think that that's one of the things, unfortunately, that wasn't really brought forward here. One of the reasons why this spot is so important to the Native people. And I am very pleased to see this council reach across the aisle and allow this to happen, because this is something that is very important to both cultures in Rapid City. And I'm very pleased to have supported this from the beginning, and I will be voting for it again tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Brad Estes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have a question for you, and then I'd like to keep the floor if I could.
Okay.
This agreement, as Steve read, states that the city deems that the proposed accessibility and parking solutions developed. So they have to develop parking and accessibility yet to be approved by the city, and who does that go to? I mean, is there by this agreement there's a process further for accessibility and parking? Is that what I understand?
If we could go to our Parks Director, Jeff Bigler, or our City Attorney, Joel Landine. Good evening, Jeff.
Good evening. Yes, if approved, this project would still have to go through the review process, just like any other project. So at that time, the various departments that would look at this would determine if there were any other stipulations regarding accessibility or parking.
What does that mean exactly? What does it mean exactly?
Brad, you still have the floor.
Thank you. Well, I was the one at Public Works that voted against this, and at that time, and I've looked at this more, and I'm not sure how I'm going to vote on it tonight. I've had a chance to talk to some constituents. I've spent 3 days over there looking at it, and Ms. Merwin and I, we did the very same thing, and I guess I see stuff a little bit different, but I have some reservation about purposefully increasing the density in that area. I think it's a wonderful project. I listened to Mrs. Cook talk about having newer generational, if I'm not trying to put words in her mouth, role models for people to look up to. And in my view, for that to work, then people need to come visit it. For this to be a success, although there won't be It might not be hundreds per day, but for it to complete the circle of what I understand they want this to accomplish, it needs visitors. And I look at that space and I want it to succeed. And I look at that space and I say, well, you know, school bus loads of kids will probably come, pull in there to look at it. You know, it'll a field trip. I mean, where, you know, how does the parking? And my concern is that if it's successful and if there are problems, there are few options down there, and the cost to cure could be great. And I want to make this work, but I just was curious by this agreement. It states that there's further things that have to be brought forward as far as accessibility and parking solutions. Is this what we're approving tonight? Is this agreement? I mean, if this is what we're approving, is this agreement? Then I'll vote in favor of it.
It is. That is what it's on, and I'll take a crack at answering some of the questions, Brad. One of the questions that needs to be answered under federal law, and I believe will be as it moves forward, is the Americans with Disabilities Act. You need to ensure that the project has adequate access for the Americans with Disabilities Act, and I believe that it will. But that's something that is included in the MOA for that reason. And if the council votes for this, and I hope that it's unanimous, what it means is that we will work with First Nations to address and mitigate all the access issues that come up. There are a few that can be mitigated but can't be gotten around, and the Americans with Disabilities Act is one of them. But I don't see that as a showstopper. I believe that that's something that we can work through. You may.
Thank you, because as my my seatmate Bonnie knew that in Public Works that I did not support this, because I had concerns about purposely doing this. And then when the gentleman was here talking about weeds, she says, "Well, he's talking about you, obnoxious weeds." And and that's how my night started. So it's been just one thing after another with her. So thank you.
Well, I sat next to her for an entire year, so you have no right to complain. No. All right, we'll go to Jerry Wright.
Well, I talked to Elizabeth, and I see this, like she said, a contemplative garden, place for people to go to, and I don't see it envisioned as a crowd gatherer, except maybe on special occasions like the War Memorial on Memorial Day. In those cases, if that happens, we handle it. I hope that the staff or whoever reviews this plan understands that the council is making a serious commitment to assist in this becoming a fruition, and that if they don't see a serious problem, they better not be obstructing it. And if they find a problem, they better be in line real quick to talk to us. But I want to see this thing go ahead, and I don't want anybody playing games with it.
Thank you, Jerry, and you don't have to worry about that. Bonnie Peterson.
I just want to ditto everything that was said, and also that I was being misquoted by my ward mate tonight, but I won't tell you exactly what I said.
All right, any further discussion? The motion is to approve item 67 as is. It's to approve the agreement that came out of committee. There's several versions attached. Everyone understands the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Item number 68. This is to authorize the reallocation of vision funds from the Fieldhouse Roosevelt Park to leisure pool at Horace Mann Park and 50-meter pool at Roosevelt Park. And let's go to Pauline Sumption for an explanation of this item, or to Jeff Bigler.
We went out for bids on the 50-meter pool down at Roosevelt. The bids came in higher than what was currently allocated in the project plan for Vision Fund. So the proposal before you is to actually take money allocated for the field house and reallocate it to additional funds to both the 50-meter pool and to the leisure pool at Horace Mann. In doing so, money from the Horace Mann pool will also get shifted into the 2014 budget for the 50-meter pool, but then we'll get fully funded plus additional money in 2015. In discussions with the Public Works Director this morning, he said that the plan should not affect the completion date of the leisure pool at Horace Mann. But prior to awarding the bid for the 50-meter pool, we do have to have the funding in place.
So Pauline, what do you say to residents of North Rapid in this neighborhood who might be concerned about what appears to be a shifting of monies? And can you address that concern?
I guess I would just tell them, like I just said, that the project is still being funded. It was originally projected to start in 2014 and to be completed in 2015. That's still the schedule, to have that work done in 2014 and 2015. And perhaps Mr. Biegler would be the more appropriate person to talk to about that versus the finance officer.
It is still the intention that the original schedule that's been talked about is still the same schedule.
We could close the door, please.
With the 50-meter pool being ready for use in the spring, early summer next year, 2014, and then the same time the following year will be the Horace Mann Leisure Pool open for business.
Thank you. We have a motion by Peterson to approve and a second by Laurenti, and we'll go to John Roberts.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Pauline, one quick question for you. There is still some contingency money left in the Vision Fund in case we do have some more overrides on this?
We have not touched the contingency funds that were allocated in this 5-year plan.
Thank you very much. I just want to make sure there's plenty of funding that we get the Horace Mann Leisure Pool done the way we want it done. Thank you.
You bet.
Thank you, John. Amanda Scott.
Thank you, Mayor. I was one of those that brought up the issues, and I wanted to make sure that the timeline, because just the way I read the spreadsheet as attached, was that this project was going to slide a year. So I know Alderman Roberts and I both share the same anticipation of seeing this park open on time, not pushed out, at least not due to planned pushing it out. I mean, we all know weather can affect construction, and so I know that no promises can be given, although I did try to get a promise out of Mr. Wolsterstorff today, and he would not promise. But it was a good discussion. The one thing that I wanted to bring forth, but my concerns have been set aside, was that I did want to have the meeting for the Vision Fund before approving this, but the understanding that I have now is that we cannot proceed with a 50-meter pool, at least to put it out for bid, unless we do approve this tonight. And so in order to keep the projects going, we need to go ahead and approve this. So thank you for coming tonight, Mr. Biegler, and setting my concerns aside. I appreciate that.
Anytime.
Thank you, Amanda. Richie Nordstrom.
Thank you, Mayor. The concern that I have, and it has nothing to do with what we're proposing as far as this motion is, and I'm supportive of it, is that let's keep an eye on what's going to happen with the field house as well. And that is one of the elements in here that should not go away on the back end of everything that needs to be in here. So I just want to make sure that stays in play and it will not be removed from the table. Thank you.
I think it's important before we proceed to the vote that people understand that because of the increased cost to build these two pools, the monies have come from the field house. There is no money in this round of vision to do the field house. I want to make sure that council understands that with this action, there is no field house. And so I want to make sure that we don't instill false hope that there's the money to build the field house in contingency or stormwater fund or CPI or anywhere else. It isn't there. So I just want to make sure that people understand that as we proceed with this discussion. Any further discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Bids.
So the first item to bid is the Roosevelt Park 50-meter pool. 3 bids were received on the project, and the recommendation is to award to Heavy Constructors, Inc. in the amount of $4,226,000.
Motion by Peterson, second by Laurenti to approve. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 70.
70 is for the water reclamation facility interim trickling filter pump station improvements for the construction and installation. 2 bids were received on this project. Recommendation is to award to Mack Construction Company, Inc. in the amount of $248,080.
We have a motion by Estes and a second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
71 is for the water rec facility interim trickling filter pump station improvements for the pump procurement. 3 bids were received on this, but the recommendation is to reject all bids and authorize staff to re-advertise.
We have a motion by Roberts and a second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Next item is for the pavement rehabilitation project from Winfield Court to Audi Drive. 3 bids were received on this project. Recommendation is to award to J&J Asphalt Company in the amount of $146,335.
Motion by Estes, second by Doyle. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 73.
73 is for the Hideaway Lane Utility Extension Project. 2 bids were received on this, and the recommendation is to award the bid in the amount of $63,710 to RCS Construction.
Motion by Peterson, second by Scott. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 74.
74 is for the Southbury Pines Sanitary Sewer Extension, Source Water Protection on West Main Street Sewer Reconstruction. 2 bids were received on this. Recommendation is to award to RCS Construction, Inc. in the amount of $547,244.
Motion by Estes, second by Nordstrom. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Pauline. We are now on public hearing items. Items 75 through 81. Public comment is now open. I do not see any speaker request forms. Public comment is now closed. We are now on items 75 through 81. Would anyone like to remove any of these items for separate consideration? If not, can we have a motion for all of them? We have a motion by Doyle and a second by Wright to approve items 75 through 81 as listed. Any discussion? Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. 82, bill list. Pauline.
Bill list is that which is attached at $8,304,491.05.
We have a motion by Laurenti and a second by Roberts to approve. Any discussion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. We have a motion to adjourn. We have a motion by Doyle and a second by Roberts. Any discussion? All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, we're adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.
Good job, council.